Welcome to the San Jose Hockey Now podcast. I'm Sheng, editor-in-chief of San Jose Hockey Now. You can also find my work at NBC Sharks and on Twitter at Sheng_Peng.
And I'm King McNally. You can find me on Twitter at halfwall_hockey, my website half-wallhockey.com, or at San Jose Hockey Now. This week, we have a very special guest later on in the show. We welcome Chris Peters. He's the senior content creator at Flow Hockey, NHL draft guru and prospect analyst, and host of the Talking Hockey Sense podcast. He's going to talk to us all about who the Sharks might be interested in picks 14, 33, and 42. It's an exciting, awesome interview that we did earlier. He
says the Sharks winning the draft lottery might be the second most important day in franchise history.
That's true. We didn't even we mentioned 14, 33, 42, but he spent a lot of time talking about Macklin Celebrini.
A lot about Macklin.
A ton of time. So if you're interested in that, stick around for the interview. We have a little bit of news this week. We're going to cover a few things. First, the Sharks trading for Ty Dellandrea from the Stars for a fourth-round pick. The Sharks claiming Barclay Goodrow and his large contract from New York Rangers. Finally, we're also going to go through my top 32, my personal top 32, and who I think the Sharks might target at 14, 33, and 42 before we get to the Chris interview. But it was a busy week, and also one that was a little contentious, I think, for Sharks fans.
A little?
A little. On Twitter, it got a little heated, I think. And it was interesting the way that everything happened on that day, because a lot of other trades happened. It seemed like NHL GMs picked up the phone for once in their brief period of time
since then too, which is funny. So it just was that one day that everyone woke up from hibernation, Stanley Cup final hibernation flight from Florida to Edmonton.
Yeah, they decided that today was the day they needed to get work done before they have to go to Vegas, and then they'll be quiet until Vegas.
Exactly, yeah.
Let's start with, because we're going to talk pretty long about Barclay Goodrow, just because I think that's the more contentious topic, like I said. Sure. But let's talk about the Ty Dellandrea trade and detail a bit about that and what we might be getting in Ty Dellandrea.
Yeah, everything I've heard is very, very strong that he is a great team guy. He is and I quote from a league source, a workaholic. A guy, obviously, who he had a pretty good 2022-23, kind of got himself up to the third line for the Stars. I think he scored 28 points? Yeah. So not too bad for a third liner, 9 goals, 19 assists, I think it was. But this past season, he struggled a little bit and was fourth line or was healthy scratched. Both years, Dallas was a pretty deep team. Both years, Dallas went to the conference finals there. So Dellandrea, 2018 first round pick. What I love about this is that Mike Grier keeps trying to fix that Ryan Merkley mistake. It was Martin Kaut in a direct trade for Merkley a couple of years ago. Philip Zadina last summer, and now it's Dellandrea.
One of these will work out, right?
One of these will work out, hopefully, right? I actually wonder, I don't know this for a fact, and this is just me, this is pure speculation, but I'm wondering if Dellandrea actually Zadina maybe is not coming back, and Dellandrea, not that Dellandrea is a one-for-one replacement, but I think it tells you that it's a different player, sort of player that Mike is looking for this summer. And I've talked about it a lot, and I think I'll touch on it when we talk about Barclay Goodrow too. But I've written about it too, that I felt like last summer, Mike trended a little more toward trying to chase some skill. Your Mike Hoffmans, your Anthony Duclairs, your Philip Zadinas, trying to sign Vladimir Tarasenko. And I think it blew up in his face. And I think that this summer there's a little bit of a different focus. And not that you need skill. You need somebody to put in the puck for Macklin Celebrini and Mikael Granlund and all those kind of guys, right? But so far from what we've seen and from what we've heard, it seems like a clearly different emphasis from Dellandrea, and we'll get to Goodrow, and also too we'll touch on Ken Atkinson, who has more skill but is also a determination will guy. Anyway, though, with Dellandrea sounds like that sort that maybe he's never going to score a lot, but if he can get himself back to what he was doing in Dallas 2 years ago on the third line, that'd be very good. I think the Sharks would be thrilled with that. And for a weak team like the Sharks, that's a middle six player. And I think it's kind of ironic too that it was pointed out. Actually, I was thinking about this too, that the fourth round pick that the Sharks traded for Dellandrea, 2025 from Winnipeg, it's Winnipeg's pick. That trade, the Sharks acquired that trade for Vladislav Nemestikov, who they acquired for Mikey Eyssimont. And Mikey Eyssimont, I know that you guys have heard me gripe about that trade over the last month as sort of a signal of the direction that Mike went last year that I ultimately did not agree with. That
Yep.
at first, I will admit, I thought it was fine, but then I saw the results this year and I was not fine. Or we saw the results this year.
Yep.
It's kind of like a Troy walking in that gift. Troy on Community, Donald Glover walking with the pizzas and everything's all good. And whoa, the whole
Yeah.
room's on
Oh,
fire. That's
yeah.
what last year was like for the Sharks.
Yeah, I like the Dellandrea trade, and I like for what you mentioned. Like, there's a chance that he's young enough and on a better role, and he has a lot of the, let's call it the B game, because we talk about the B game a lot. That a lot of dudes were missing from the Sharks last year.
Yep.
The player name that I've dubbed for this kind of guy, because Mike Grier, when he first came in, targeted a few of these guys. It's you've heard of like Johnny Football and Johnny Hockey. This is Mikey Hockey. This is Mike Grier, but as players.
Yeah,
and like
yeah.
and
That's a
and
good.
I think it's Mikey Hockey, and that's the
Getting it
kind of
back.
guy that he targets, and it's not bad because if he only targeted Mikey Hockey, he wouldn't draft guys like Will Smith or Casper
Right.
Haltonen or Quinton Musty. So I think he's right now just looking for something to be competitive while he's waiting for the hyper skill guys to kind of develop, and that's fine for me. I think for now. I think it becomes a bigger issue if he doesn't adjust when he does have a skilled team to adding more skill to it.
Sure.
If it's all just kind of grinders and stars and grinders model that the Sharks used to employ. I don't know. We'll see. But
I wonder. I don't know this. I don't know why it seemed like Greer went away from quote unquote Mikey Hockey last summer.
yeah,
I
weird,
It's
right?
also ironic too that he traded a guy like Mikey that played Mikey Hockey.
They did very much
He-
so.
yeah, and I think the Sharks lineup would look slightly better if it was Eyssimont and Dellandrea in it. But from everything I've heard about Dellandrea, that he's not one of those guys like a Zadina that if Zadina hits, then yes, he's a 20 goal guy or something, right? But if Zadina doesn't hit, then he's a guy that maybe doesn't belong on an NHL team because Zadina right now is kind of just a tweener guy, right? That has probably too much skill to grind and doesn't have like that will to grind all the time. He hasn't quite. It's a mental thing with Philip. Philip has the ability to do it, but he's strong
Yeah.
enough, he's fast enough, but it's just not. He's not consistent with it. Whereas the Dellandrea has a different mindset, from what I understand. And what I like about Dellandrea is that he is already, from everything I understand, is already a pretty good NHL player. That he's going to be on a good team. He can be a solid fourth liner already, and he works his ass off. He's fast. He's big. So he's got a lot of things going for him already if he never finds that offense. And if he finds that offense and if he becomes, I'm not saying he's going to find a lot of offense, but if he becomes like a 15-35 guy for the Sharks, that is a very, very valuable third liner. You can win with a guy like that in the playoffs if he's on your third line. I think that's the hope. That's sort of his ceiling there. And if he doesn't reach it, he's still a better than what he had last year. And so I think that this is a win-win trade. Not a lot was sent out.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't see any sort of drawback to it.
I think it's better than like the Studnicka trade, which I think he gave up a fifth or a sixth for Studnicka. I
Sure.
can't remember which. I
Yeah,
think it's a
Dellandrea
little
is a
bit
better
better.
player, a more established player than Stanika for sure.
So it's still filling that role. I think he's trying to fill on the fourth line to get some players that are actually on a good team, fourth line players, not
Yeah.
just like plug in kind of guys.
Like Stanika, there was a question mark because Stanika was bouncing around between the AHL and NHL. I don't think, from everyone I talked to, at least people like the scouts I talked to, like they were not as. You can read in the stories that I've written about both guys, right? I always do when the Sharks acquire somebody. I go to my sources and I ask them, "What do you think of this player?" And for sure, the enthusiasm for Stanika was not as high as it is for Dellandrea.
Yeah.
And I think that's telling. It's telling about where the guy is right now, and as a player, that he is a pretty good player now, and there's potential for more. Whereas Tanika is still getting to a point of he's trying to get to even being a pretty good player right now. We're not sure if he'll get there.
This is just like there's so many guys right now that are RFAs or like that the Sharks have that haven't been signed yet. It's gonna be interesting. They have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 RFAs, I think. Eight RFAs that are like NHL-ish or NHL adjacent. That's a lot. So I wonder
Yeah,
how
it goes
many of
back
these are
to,
got
I
him.
reported a couple weeks ago about the Sharks, I think, looking to bring back
Hmm.
Carpenter and Bailey, but I think I said this too, but if I didn't, I want to make sure that I put it out there that I don't think the design is for them to be an NHL team. Like last year, the fact that they were an NHL team, as hard as they work and good guys that they are, was a sign that things weren't going well with the NHL roster because Carpenter was earmarked for the Barracuda.
Hmm.
Bailey was earmarked for the Barracuda too. And so I think it's sort of the same idea that like they're very good depth pieces to have. Like in a pinch, Carpenter can do a good job at center. In a pinch, Bailey can do a good job within the NHL as a wing. But I think the idea is maybe a little bit more that they play down there if they want to come back. That's why there's the if thing, because maybe they get a better offer. And if they get a better offer, a one-way offer from a team, then why would you stay with the Sharks, right? Not to say I don't know what the Sharks offer is to
Yeah,
them,
for
but
sure.
I do think though that the thinking is more that those guys, they're happy with them last year, but they see them more as being down in the AHL.
I think something to keep in mind for people, and this goes into the Goodrow meat of our discussion, is that Nico Sturm and Mikael Granlund are both in the last year of their contract now as well. So like both of those players who are two reliable, good forwards are in their last year of their deal and are 30 and 32. Like they could get value in the NHL. There's a theoretical possibility they're traded to the deadline. So guys like
Maybe.
Dellandrea or Goodrow, we're gonna need bodies at some point. I
But I
feel
think there's
like,
an argument for keeping both of them unless you get an outstanding offer. And that's what I learned again about the Mikey Asimon thing, that
of
unless
course.
you're getting like Barclay Goodrow a long time ago got basically a first rounder, right? And granted, the Sharks did not use the first round pick great.
Hmm.
Ozzy Weisblad hasn't quite hit yet, but
Sure.
that's not the point though. The value that they got for Barclay Goodrow was excellent. So
Yeah.
you make that trade any day. If someone says to you, "We're going to give you a second round pick for Mikey Asimon," okay. If someone at the deadline says we're going to give you that a second round for Nico Sturm, all right. But
Hmm.
if someone just says here's a fourth rounder, what do you need with another fourth rounder if you're the Sharks?
Probably
So
nothing.
that's where I've changed the most. That what I've learned about team building, watching this disaster this past year. That nice fourth round pick, a great kind of value gain from waiver claim to fourth round pick isn't, that looks great on paper, and it is great on paper, but it wasn't worth it for what a guy like Mikey brought to, or the Mikey hockey that Mikey brought to the Sharks. And so I hear what you're saying about Sturm and Granlund. And yeah, Goodrow is sort of a natural replacement for Sturm. If you do trade Sturm at the deadline, Sturm doesn't want to come back. But and I guess that's another factor too. That yeah, they're both UFAs, and so if they aren't going to come back at all, then yeah, get what you can because the last 20
Hmm.
games of the season don't matter that much.
Yep.
But if both are willing to come back at reasonable contracts, I would think about it. Obviously, you're not going to give Mikael Granlund like a 6-year contract or something like that, right? But like, if he's willing to come back for, let's say he is the Mikael Granlund from last year, and I'm
Hmm.
going to get to this part too. That Mikael was a very, very good leader. He was impactful, a
Yeah.
difference making leader last year, and so that is worth money to me too. It's not worth it to some people, some of the critics on Twitter, right? Intangibles, but Mikhail brought that along with 60 points.
Hmm.
And so if a guy like that is willing to come back on a reasonable contract, like he just likes to be around, he likes the situation or whatever, right? Then I think that's a guy you keep, and you don't just trade because someone's for anything, for a third round pick or fourth round pick. And I would say the same about Sturm too. So anyway, so I get what you're saying, but
I think it would need to be a good trade, is what I'm saying. And
yeah,
I'm wondering if there will be markets for both.
yeah,
If
yeah,
Grier listens.
yeah. I mean, there will be a market if they are who they were last year, but how good it is, like we saw this past year, right? Like we heard that Granlund was out there and offer,
Hmm.
and Sturm too. I believe they were available, but
Sure.
I do like that Mike held on to them because whatever he was getting wasn't, I would assume, wasn't outstanding, or they would be gone. The Sharks would have traded them.
Hmm.
So
Yeah. We'll see. I just the Goodrow thing. That's as this. Let's talk about it because it was the Oh man.
I have the four. I spent 20 minutes right now. What I was going to say, because I had to kind of put my thoughts on paper, and I have the 4 stages of Goodrow acceptance here.
The 4 stages of Goodrow acceptance.
At least
Yeah,
this is what I went through.
he wasn't very. He didn't put up a lot of points, and he has
Right.
very bad charts that you're going to talk about. But I don't know. It's gonna be fine, regardless. He's still better than the majority of the bottom 6 that they put in last year, and
Absolutely.
you never know, like what a better, like if he puts up again more offensive numbers and stuff, like maybe there is actually a chance to have Barclay Goodrow be good in 3 years and not just like
I
just
think
a oh god,
I
we're
think he will, and I have argument for that I'm going to get to.
So I think it's a little dumb to, if we're going to learn more when Mike does his press conference about stuff,
Yeah, on
but
Monday. Yeah.
I think it was a little dumb if that whole like no trade clause thing. But I also wonder how much of that was agent related too. But
Well,
we'll
we'll talk.
see.
Yeah. Like, we'll touch on that. I have opinion about that too. So maybe
So
you want to jump in when
yeah,
your
go
thoughts
ahead.
about that. So
Yeah, go ahead.
all right.
You
So the
got more
4
thoughts than I do.
stages of Barclay Goodrow acceptance.
Yep.
So a week ago, you guys might have saw I did a story about potential cap dumps that the Sharks could target. I mentioned 12 guys, from Patrick Liney, who rhymes with Blimey, who I don't think the Sharks could touch with a 6-foot pole. Cam Atkinson was on there too, who the Sharks are looking after, are trying to acquire. Doesn't want to come here, but he sounds like a good guy for the Sharks because of some skill, but also intangibles. So that does matter to me. But anyway, so I did an article, and someone asked me, one of my commenters on a story. Thanks for, it's a good question. Asked, why not Goodrow? And the 3 things that were most important to me that the Sharks look for from a cap dump, from any player this summer, the 3 main factors were: number one, that they were number one, most important is that they were really good leaders, not just like decent room guys, good room guys, but guys that were difference makers in terms of leadership. As many, you can't have a 20 guys like that in a room, because they actually are hard to acquire, but as many as you can acquire. And the base level is being really great in a room, even if you're not like a leader type. But if you can get a guy that really makes an impact in that way, that's really important, because the Sharks were missing that last year. Number 2, and this is the skill talent part, a forward that can play top 9 or a defenseman that can play top 4. Not necessarily that they would be exceptional at it, because if you're exceptional at it, then you're probably on a better team and you don't want to come to the Sharks. But that if you
Sure.
are given that role with the Sharks, that you can pull it off, that you can push on defense, you can push Mario Farrell down the lineup. That's no offense to Mario, but you need 1 or 2 defensemen that can make sure that he's not playing 23 a night. Get him down to 19 or 20 or something like that if you can. On forwards, you need centers just in case, potential centers just in case Macklin or Will aren't quite ready, and also too, Logan Couture is not healthy. You need a lot more two-way wingers, quality two-way wingers. Right now, you've got, in terms of wingers who belong on a top 9 on most teams, maybe nobody, honestly. As much as we love William Eklund and Fabian Zetterlund on a good team, are they a top 9 winger? I don't know. But they're your best bets right now. That's fine. They had decent seasons last year, so hopefully they grow. They're both young, and you need to add more guys around them that can kind of be competent, not exceptional, but competent top 9 wingers. And then the third factor is acquisition costs. Sharks aren't in a place now where they should be spending. We talked about this, trading a mint for a Mitch Marner, or signing Jake Gensel for 7 years. Obviously, both players would be huge improvements to the forward group, but I don't think you make that kind of push until you know what you've got in Macklin Celebrini and Will Smith. Now, if Macklin and Will come in next year and they're exceptional, they are Calder Trophy candidates, you've got top 6 forwards in them, then if you want to mirror the Chicago Blackhawks and Taves and Kane, once again, their first years, they came out together. Kane won a Calder Trophy. Taves was third in the Calder voting. And within a couple of years, they signed Marian Hossa. Then that's when you make that push, when you have a pretty good sense that, okay, Macklin Celebrini, he is the guy. Will
Mm-hmm.
Smith, he is the guy. So right now, though, we don't know that. We need to see that this year. So the earliest you start to cash in your chips, if you're Mike Grier, in my opinion, is next summer. So acquisition cost means a lot. So those are the three things. The thing that I wasn't convinced with Goodrow, we know the leadership thing he fulfills, and we know because of his contract, 3 years left, 3.642 million AAV, which is really high for a guy who scored 4 goals, 8 assists this past year, and was on a fourth line role with the Rangers. That's very expensive, obviously. So he's going to be cheap. He's not going to cost a lot, right? So, but the other part though about how good is he? Because he was playing so much fourth line this past year, right? So I wasn't convinced of that. Okay, so that's number one. So I was kind of ruling out Goodrow, not completely, but he wasn't top of mind for me for those reasons.
Okay.
Okay, then Molly Walker reports that the Sharks were likely to claim Goodrow, and so that made me wonder. And I have an article that corresponds to that, and you guys can probably guess that a lot of my articles are just I wonder things, and so I just check up on them. And so I wonder because I only seen Barclay play a couple games this year against the Sharks, and of course in the playoffs when if he actually was pretty good in the playoffs, right?
Yep.
And so I checked around with the NHL scouts, and they told me that there might be a little decline, but that he could still play a top 9 role on a weaker team. That the what we know about Barclay Goodrow with the Sharks, the last year he was with the Sharks, and with the Lightning, sort of the peak of Barclay Goodrow, and his first year or two with the Rangers,
Mm.
guy that can skate, determination, motor, all those kind of things, right? And so they told me that that was all there still. And sometimes it happens, right? We see sometimes that on a really deep team that you don't get to play as much. And so maybe that's what happened with Goodrow, because Goodrow, I think, averaged about 12 minutes this past season. His first 2 seasons in New York under a different coach, under Gallant, I think he was playing about 15 minutes a night. And so that's a big drop. You know, you're in solid third line role, touching second line at times, at least in terms of your usage, and you get dropped to fourth line. And sometimes it's not because the player isn't good. It's because the team is deeper or a coach has different ideas, right? So okay, so this is sounding good to me. I listen. These are guys that their job is to watch the games and watch a lot of games and watch a lot of games that I'm not watching because they don't cover just the Sharks. And so they're telling me that yeah, the player is still good. So good. And so I would add to it too that that's when we also learned about Cam Atkinson, that the Sharks were
Mm-hmm.
interested in him. Darren Drager reported that, and Cam didn't want to come here. And let's couple in the Ty Dellandrea trade, right? And so this is all starting to sound good to me because there's a certain profile player that Mike is trying to add. And I'll put it in a different way, not saying Mikey hockey, but that's still relevant. But when Mike Grier came on in 2022, he talked all about let's have a hard to play against team.
Sure. Yeah.
And he said that every year, right? And the first offseason, I think he did accomplish that to some degree. Guys like Nico Sturm, Matt Benning, Luke Cunnin, et cetera, right? He did not accomplish that last summer. And his moves were not players that you would say were hard to play against. No one would say that about an Anthony Duclair, about a Philip Zadina, and Mike Hoffman, and most of the players that he added. So, like I said, for whatever reason, he strayed from that. He talked about wanting a hard to play against team, and he gave David Quinn in last year, or this past season, a lot of not hard to play against players. It's hard to mold a hard to play against team when your roster was constructed the way that it was last year, right? And so anyway, so I've talked consistently over the last couple of months that the Sharks that's where they need to go. That's the most realistic path for them for improvement that doesn't interrupt the rebuild, right? You can trade first rounders for Mitch Marner and improve the team, but obviously that's not advisable where you are in the rebuild right now, or at least I don't think so. And so I love this sort of idea of what they're trying to do. Even the skill guy they wanted to add in Cam Atkinson, 5'8" player. People are like, oh, size. It's not about size, and I've always said that. Like Mike does like size for sure, but it's more about it's that old cliche. It's not the size of the dog, right? It's the size of the heart of the dog, or whatever that cliche is, right? No, Cam
Yep.
Atkinson is that. He's 5'8", but bowling ball, plays inside, heart and soul kind of player, right? That's a guy that you want around Will Smith and Macklin Celebrini, and who may still have the skill. He had a rough year last year in terms of production, and herniated disc in 2022-23, missed the whole season. But I talked to people, I might still write a story about it, but people I talked to still like him. And so there's a chance that on the Sharks, more of a role, he's basically becomes your first line winger. Maybe he gets back to 20 goals, maybe. He has the skill for it. He's shown it, right? He's a 6-time, I think, 20 goal scorer. He's hit 30. He's even hit 40 once. So anyway, so I was really liking the idea of what Mike was doing here, the profile. And with Goodrow too, the Sharks have plenty of money, and we will talk a lot about that. I know just because you have a lot of money doesn't mean that you spend it stupidly. But along with that plenty of money, right? There's also a lot of time before July 1st. So higher end players like Atkinson, they can change their mind. So maybe they'll come to the Sharks, or maybe you sign somebody, right? And so I wasn't too worried about, So anyway, everything looking up. So I'm at that stage of it, right?
Yeah, so you got a little bit higher on your stage of grief, I guess.
Yeah, stage of acceptance, not grief. There's
Acceptance.
never any
Sorry.
grief about it. It's not my money. It's Hassel's money. So
This is true. The Sharks do have a lot of cap space, and the other thing to mention is that I think because the people have become very accustomed to saying this over the past 5 years is like, oh, the cap space, cap space, cap space. Now it's coming out of that whole flat cap era. We're actually
right, that
getting
too.
inflation in the cap a little. So I think that talking point is not going to be as sound. Like people are like, well, you could have taken on X, Y contract for a first or a second, maybe, but maybe nowadays it's not as prevalent.
Yeah, teams aren't giving you as much to take contracts, which I
Exactly.
think we have seen the last couple of years too.
Mhm.
So, okay, so now let's get down to the fourth stage of acceptance. So anyway, the previous three stages, quick recap. He was sort of after the Goodrow was after an afterthought to me, and then I started liking what, because it fit into the profile of other moves that Mike seems to be making. So I started liking it. So
Okay.
the final stage here that I don't like, that no one likes, is Larry Brooks reporting that the Sharks were on Goodrow's new no trade clause. Goodrow had a 15-team no trade clause, and as far as we understand it, it's nothing to do with San Jose and the city or whatever, just that the Sharks aren't good. And Goodrow has been in the conference finals for 5 of the last 6 years, actually going back to his last full season with the Sharks, 2019, 2020, 21 with 2020 and 2021 with the Lightning, and 2022 and 2024 with the Rangers. So he's been very, very successful. And going to back to the Sharks last place team is really going to be a sea change for him. Very, very, very different. So you don't love that. I don't love that. Obviously, like in an ideal world, somehow they could have talked with Goodrow about it. Maybe they did. Who knows? We know that Goodrow is good friends with Logan Couture, so maybe there's conversations there that happen, or that there's some feelers there that okay. But the way that Goodrow describes it, he had no idea until the waiver, like he was put on waivers. So I assume that there was no conversations with him before through the Sharks or whatever, right? But I assume that those conversations have taken place in the last few days. And it wouldn't surprise me if a guy like a Couture would be somebody that you send to talk to his buddy and say, hey, I know it's not what you want. You
Mm-hmm.
want to still win, but here are the benefits of the situation. And most importantly, too, I think that things are looking up with the Sharks. There is something to sell here that, hey, we've got this kid coming in, Macklin Celebrini, that
Sure.
is potentially a franchise player. And so there's real hope in San Jose, whereas I think we've been really scratching for hope the last couple of years. And so there is a selling point for Goodrow. But anyway, you don't love that Goodrow doesn't want to be here right now.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of time from now to training camp, and players get over it. And Elliot Friedman said this too, and I thought this before. I think I wrote this in an article that there's a lot of time before, and most players, they will get over it. And Goodrow, the way that Friedman put it well. He's a professional, and things will smooth itself over. Things will be fine. There's some massaging, but things will be fine. And Friedman also mentioned or suggested that probably the upset is more at the Rangers, because the
Mm-hmm.
Rangers put him on waivers without telling him. They didn't really give him a heads up. And so that might be more of it than. I mean, actually, I think the Sharks are paying Goodrow a lot of respect here, actually, because they're picking up his whole contract, and we want you for this role. We know we suck. We know that we're disappointment to you in that way. That okay, you're not going back to the conference finals next year, probably.
Sure.
But we love you and we want you for this role, and we'll pay you your full ticket to fulfill this role. So I think that's actually a lot of respect that Mike is paying Barclay there. So anyway, so those are my 4 stages, and I have a kind of a overall, like, after all these 4 stages of acceptance. But do you have anything to say before I get into my final?
I think the only thing that I wonder how much we're gonna ever learn about, but is the connection between like New York and Mike Grier, and like it seems the timing is just insane. So like there has to be some sort of, I'm putting this guy on waivers, and this is all speculation, putting this guy on waivers, wink wink, for the Sharks to then be like, yep, we're claiming him. So I really wonder how much communication there was beforehand, because he does have
I'm
a no
sure there
trade
was
clause.
between Mike and Chris Drury. There had to be.
That's what I'm saying. So there, he has a no trade clause that has the Sharks on it. Did they just figure this out to do it? And if so, then I wonder if there's anything to come in the future from Chris Drury, like, because he's kind of doing him a huge solid, like Mike Grier
Yeah,
is. He wants
that's
this
interesting.
player, but like
Yeah.
in the future, maybe there's something there, like you know.
I have 2 thoughts about it. First, that actually Elliot Friedman said today we're recording on Saturday the 22nd. So
Yeah.
on his 32 Thoughts podcast, he actually suggested that teams, it's not just like a fanciful hope from fans that there's more to this transaction,
Mm-hmm.
that other teams are eyeing it, seeing if there's anything shady going on, that
Yeah.
there's something going to happen between New York and San Jose that kind of is sort of a repayment for the
Even
Sharks
if
taking
it's
on
like,
Goodrow.
even if it's like New York has the 30th pick and San Jose has 33, and there's somebody at 30 that they really want in this upcoming draft,
Right.
and it's
Something
like
small like that, but
something
sure,
tiny.
maybe,
Yeah.
like I was on the Locked On Flyers podcast with my buddy Russ Cohen, and we were talking, this was 2 weeks ago actually, and
Mm-hmm.
I suggested, because Cam Atkinson, I even that back then, that's the kind of player that Sharks should acquire. And so I suggested trading 14 for 12 and Cam Atkinson. Obviously, Atkinson will have to agree to come here, which he doesn't want. But to me,
Yeah.
that's a win-win. The Flyers get out of that contract, and Sharks move up a couple spots for your Yakimchuks or your
Yeah.
Helleniuses or whatever, right? And so maybe something, so that's along those lines, that maybe there is a little bit of a wink, a little bit of a favor. Nothing tremendous. If you're thinking that you're gonna come out of this with Gabe Perreault, I've seen that. Like, keep dreaming.
What? No, it's already done with.
That's not gonna happen.
Yeah, it's not happening.
But yeah, but the Rangers have the 30th pick. Is that right?
Yeah, they have the 30th pick.
So yeah, moving 3 spots up,
Maybe.
that's worth something, right? So, and the other part of it, I thought too, that was my theory for a while, but I may not be true, but I don't know this for a fact that it's not true, is that I do very much think that there are teams out there that are looking for similar profile players like Goodrow, and they have a lot of cap space too. Like,
Mm-hmm.
would it surprise you if Chicago had claimed Goodrow?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know this for a fact. I've asked around. No one has given me anything that I can say like the Blackhawks were gonna claim Goodrow. But I very much think though that Goodrow's overall package of still present hockey skill,
Mm-hmm.
can play third line at least on a not so good team still, that people are saying,
Sure.
and the intangible factors, right? That he's valuable to other teams. So people are treating Goodrow as if he's valueless, and he's not. And so I don't know this for a fact, but it wouldn't shock me if we learned that another team was looking for, because that's what Chicago needs, right? Chicago needs more guys. I think very much Chicago and San Jose, maybe Anaheim, they're going to be looking for some of the similar free agents this off season, because they're all young teams that need better example guys, especially Chicago and San Jose. Anaheim's got a few more of those veteran guys already, but definitely Chicago and Anaheim. I mean, we talked about this a couple weeks ago, right? When it was Elliot Friedman suggesting Chicago and Genso, and Jeff Merrick saying San Jose and Genso. And so, that makes sense, because they're looking for similar profile players. They're trying to be a little more respectable, but most importantly, surround their Bedards or Celebrinis with a certain type of player.
Yeah.
But anyway, so those are my those are two things about that. But okay, so my overall final Goodrow thoughts, at least for now.
Yeah.
I'm gonna dig into a little bit more. I need to watch a little more of his video and also look into more of his stats, right? But so the first thing I was worried about was that there was a large decline in his motor and skating. And like I said, the scouts I talked to, that it's still pretty good. And maybe we can see that in the playoffs too, right? And of course, I am aware of the charts, his so ugly charts. But I would ask you guys though, that are staunchly behind the charts. So how much are you factoring in how his usage was this past year? And what I mean by that is that Laviolette, and he did this in Washington too. He did this in Nick Dowd. That Laviolette likes having kind of a stopper line that is all his defensive zone faceoffs go. Most of them go to the stopper line or the stopper center. And that's what he did to Goodrow. Goodrow had a 75.7 basically face-off zone start in the defensive zone at 5-on-5. 75%. That is very, very extreme. I'll give you an example of how extreme that is. Let's see. Goodrow had the 6th toughest zone starts of 375 forwards this past year. 5-on-5, 500 plus, 5-on-5 minutes. This is all natural stat trick. Actually, the guy who had the easiest zone starts, and this tells you how Laviolette likes to do things, were Panarin had the easiest zone starts, and Lafreniere was the 3rd easiest zone starts. So he likes to stack.
Okay.
Sorry, he likes to stack offense in the offensive zone faceoffs, and he likes to stack defense in the defensive zone faceoffs. And Goodrow had never dealt with that kind of extreme usage, even though Goodrow is a defensive player, right? He's never had to deal with that kind of extreme usage. To give you an example, last 2 years under Gallant. Okay, so this year with Laviolette, Goodrow had a 24%. He only 24% of his faceoffs started in the offensive zone. Only 24%.
Yeah.
Last year with Gallant, it was 43% and 44% the year before. His last year in Tampa was 45. His first year, or the part of the season he played in Tampa after he got traded, was in the 50s. His last year in San Jose was 44. So basically, his usage went from kind of normal, like defensive leaning, definitely, but normal, balanced, right? He got his share of offensive zone faceoffs, his chances to score, right? Factoring in, look at the drop in production, right? Goodrow, the last 2 years, I think, scored 13 goals each year and was basically a 30-point guy. This year, obviously dropped, and there's a lot of it right there, right? It's in the usage right there, right? And so, like I said, Goodrow had the 6th toughest usage right there. So no, Nick Dowd was there, so he was still used that way. The Capitals had sort of a defensive stopper line, and Dowd, Malenstein, and Abe Kubel. And Pittsburgh, Achari and Carter are 4th and 5th, so that was sort of their stopper line. And then there's Goodrow right here. And so this does explain at least some of the offensive decline, and this explained the minutes too, how he was used, and it definitely does explain some of those charts, some of those extreme shot charts. And yes, I know that they weren't great last year, but at least this goes from unsightly or horrific to it's a little less horrific in the previous years when the usage is more normal. And with the Sharks, I think that Goodrow will get a more normal usage because Goodrow is actually on this Sharks team pretty good offensively. Not so much on the Rangers when you've got Panarin and Lafreniere and Kreider and down the line, right? But on this Sharks team, Goodrow is going to be a little better offensively. I mean, he's going to be among a little higher up in terms of the offensive food chain. He might even get some power play time with the Sharks. He might be good enough for that. Honestly, I mean, he was getting power play time with the Sharks his last year with the Sharks, and he was good enough for it because the Sharks weren't a very good team. And it's along the same lines, I think, this coming year too, that the Sharks won't be very deep, and so Goodrow will be qualified to play some power play and some offensive zone faceoffs. And so the stats will get better. The counting stats will get better. The underlying stats will get better, right? So I would guess, based on what the scouts are saying with the eye test and his extreme use, normalizing his extreme usage, that I think that there's a good chance that Barclay Goodrow goes back to being about a 30-point guy, which he was the last couple of years in New York. And so, okay, so that's the on the ice part, right? Now, the intangibles part, if you don't think intangibles matter, then I'm not going to try to convince you. That's such an exhausting thing to try to convince people of. But I do think that it matters, and I think it matters a lot. And so I will say that what he brings to the table, I do think that is Mike obviously thinks so too, that it's special in its own way. And that determination, the details defensively, that winner's mentality, that obvious, I think that's very important for this group of your Will Smiths and your Macklin Celebrinis and all that kind of stuff, right? And so that's, I guess, what I'll say about the intangibles part of it, that I'm not trying to convince if you don't think it matters, it does, then okay. Good luck building a team that way, but all right. Actually, I think that that's what Mike kind of built last year. It was not as many intangibles with that team last year, and it was literally the worst steaming pile of hockey that I've ever watched. But
both the tangible and intangible aspects.
Yes, it was tangibly the worst, and it was
tangibly and intangibly awful. So,
and I would argue too, though, that it's not easy to find difference-making leadership. Yeah, it's easy to find guys who are decent, good in a room, that are likable, whatever, right? That's not that hard to find, right? But I think the last year, in my opinion, and from what I understand, talking to people around the Sharks, including talking with David Quinn and talking with just people around, right? Like, I would say that last offseason, the Sharks brought in just one guy that I would say was a difference-making leader. One guy. They didn't bring in enough. And who would you say it was in your opinion? Just throwing it out there at you.
From last season? Last offseason?
Yep.
Oh man. I'm trying to think of who they brought in. Mikael Granlund. Yeah.
It's Granlund. Yeah. So I'm not saying that, like, they brought in a guy like Kyle Burrows, good guy, great guy, but
sure.
There's a sort of a gravitas that Granlund has a little more of, because Granlund's been a very successful player, world-class national player, right? 50, 60 point, actually the best player on the Sharks too, best healthy player on the Sharks last year, or best player who ended the season with the Sharks once Hurdle got traded, right? So that helps too, right? And with Goodrow's a little different, because obviously Goodrow is not going to score 60 points for you, but Goodrow has the Stanley Cups. He has also that he was an integral part of those Stanley Cups too.
Sure.
He wasn't just a passenger on those teams. And so there's that part of it, right? And so anyway, so difference-making leadership. So not just being a good leader, but difference-making leadership. And so there's other guys we can talk about who the Sharks brought in. Like, I think, honestly, Duclair's leadership was, I'll be frank, was a little overrated, right? And we saw that he was scratched a couple times, right? And so I think that kind of tells you a little bit something that will run. I like Duke a lot. I think that on a winning team, he's a good fit there. But on this team, on this awful team, right? You need guys to rise above the circumstances. I think Granlund did. I don't think Duclair did. And there's a reason why Duclair was a little bit quicker out the door there, at least from the Sharks' perspective of things, right? And so other guys they brought in, right? Your Hoffman, Giovanni Smiths, those aren't the guys for that. I mentioned Burrows, right? Good guy, good fit in the locker room, but is he the leader type? Does he feel comfortable doing that as a guy that is not a big minutes guy, right? All those kind of things. Doesn't have Stanley Cups in his name, all that kind of stuff, right? Different than Goodrow, right? And so they didn't bring in enough of those guys last year, and I think they're trying to. Like, I like Dellandrea, obviously is not going to be a difference-making leader, but he obviously is going to be a good fit at least. He's going to work his ass off, and he's going to be a good example, great teammate. Everything I hear about him, spoken with coaches about him, so he is kind of everything that you're looking for there. But in terms of like leaders, Barclay Goodrow is that. Cam Atkinson, if the Sharks are able to get him, convince him to come, Cam Atkinson should be that too. And you need more of guys like that. Guys who, when they speak, people listen more. Guys that have confidence talking because they have resume. Barclay Goodrow has resume. Mikael Granlund has resume. So overall, Goodrow is no bargain. We know that. I'm never going to argue with you that he's worth everything I've said that I like about him, that he's worth $3.642 million AAV. He's not. But can he get himself up to like being a 2.5 valuable player, 2.5 million valuable? Yeah, I think it's very possible he can do that. And so then that difference, it doesn't feel as bad anymore, right? And so the Sharks can afford it. As we said, they have a ton of cap space. And very, very important, it's a 3 years left on his contract. So 3 years that leads perfectly into when Will Smith and Macklin Celebrini's ELC end. So it's not going to be a contract that's crippling in any way for the Sharks in terms of their future plans, I think, or their future plans to get themselves back in the playoffs. And finally, I want to add one last thing too, that actually Cam Atkinson reminds us of, that you can't just get anybody that you want. And so if you think, and I may have not convinced you at this point, but if you think that Barclay is a pretty special leader, he's just not just a good guy in the room, but he does have that trait. And if I convince you that Barclay should be a better on the ice player with the Sharks, with softer usage and more minutes and all that kind of stuff, right? So if we're with me that far, right, that you can't just acquire anybody that you want. We saw this with Cam Atkinson, right? That you might target like, hey, here's 6 guys that we like that are special as leaders and all that sort of thing, right? And you're not going to get all of them because you can't, because they have no trades. Barclay had a no trade, and if it was up to a trade, he would never be in San Jose. Cam Atkinson, not waived by the Flyers, he's exercising his no trade and not wanting to come here, right? And so you kind of can't get just anybody that you want. So if you have a chance to get somebody through waivers, then you kind of got to take that chance. And I know it's a risk. I know it's a risk with Goodrow could decline even more as a player for sure. He might sad sack his next couple of seasons with the Sharks, which maybe. I don't foresee happening, but that's possible, right? But do I think it's a good bet? Is it a reasonable risk for a Sharks team that desperately needs better players and better leadership? Overall, I still think so, even with everything that's come out about his no trade clause.
I'm more convinced than I was before, but I just I think you made a lot of good points on Goodrow. That was very, very thorough. I appreciate it. All this would be fine to me if Goodrow wants to play here. If we get an interview with Goodrow saying, "Yeah, I'm excited to be in San Jose next year," I'm fine with it. I want him to actually. Hopefully,
it is curious though that he still hasn't talked yet, so it might be a little while coming.
And maybe Mike Grier's explanation will kind of explain a little bit more. I think he's going to say all the things that we know he's going to say. He's a good leader. We want him in the room. He's familiar with the area. It was but there isn't no risk. There's some risk. It's just
for sure. I'm not arguing.
It's whether or not you believe it's a reasonable risk. I don't know. I'm 50-50 on it, but I'd lean less. I'm less excited than I would be more excited.
Worst case scenario though, like if it blows up and he doesn't want to be here and he sucks, it's 3 years at $3.5 million.
You waive him again if you feel like he's
for this Sharks team. You can.
He goes back to the Barracuda. There you go.
Oh, that would be
That's the full
exceptional in its
circle.
way,
You know?
just for irony. I know he'd hate it, and I'm not laughing because he
Full
deserves it, but
circle.
just because it'd just be funny. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
it's like he
pretty
came
ends
up
up.
from the Barracuda. He ends up on the Barracuda. I mean, then you're only spending 2.5 million instead of
Hey, you know
3.6.
what?
So
Maybe next year, then he can lead the Barracuda to the Calder Cup conference
hell
finals
yeah,
or whatever, AHL conference finals.
yeah.
So
Get Goodrow back
keep
in the place where he belongs. No, I'm kidding.
keep his streak going.
I
But
think I think he'll have a better year next year. I think he'll have like a 25-point year, play penalty kill, and
yeah,
then look pretty decent at 3.6, and people will kind of go, meh. As long as he wants to be here. That's my big
yeah,
thing.
I think that's what I think will happen. I think they can convince. I mean, I
Yeah,
don't know. Obviously, I don't know the inner work, but usually hockey. I mean, hockey players,
yeah,
they will eventually. Goodrow's a team guy at heart, right? We've seen that with
sure.
the Sharks, with the Lightning, with the Rangers, right? It just so happens that his team really sucks now, which is a bummer. And so I don't fault Goodrow for needing some time here because this is, like I said,
Yeah,
this is a different situation
he's
than
going from
he has
like
dealt with in the last half decade.
he's going from just constant playoffs and good teams to
Like the
like
conference finals. Yeah, 5 of the last 6 years. Yep.
now to like the crap of the crap.
Yeah,
But
it's basically from the top four of the NHL every year to the top four of the draft lottery for the next year or two.
but maybe
So
he,
it's
yeah.
different. It's different for
I
sure.
do I do appreciate that the Grier is trying to insulate the guys at least somewhat though. The young
Right. And I
guys.
think this is the right way to do it. I mean, I'm gonna get more into I'm gonna write more about it either, but a guy like a line A, I think is a very bad idea. And this is in full
It's
respect
probably not going to work
to
out.
Patrick's sort of his mental, like his health and things he's going through. Full respect to that. But from he's not a guy that is a I'll just put it like nicely that I think that people I talk to think is a winning hockey player.
Sure.
He is a good hockey player. He can score 30 goals in his sleep. There's no question about that. But is he a guy that you want Will Smith to emulate, that you want Macklin Celebrini to emulate? I don't know. I don't tend to
Hmm.
think so, honestly. And so
Yeah, I
even
get
though
you.
he has all the talent in the world, yeah, like that's not the guy.
Yeah.
So I like this direction because I know that you're capping yourself off in terms of skill, in terms of actual goals on the board, but I think you're winning in terms of or you're gaining in leadership determination and also goals off the board, goals against.
Yeah.
I think overall I like this direction. So
It's a Greer is nothing but interest, like nothing but if you nothing good to say about Greer, he's at least interesting in the way that he acquires people, like players. He will find he's been dumpster diving in a lack of a better term
yeah.
for a little bit now, and like grabbing guys off of the pile to be like maybe this one will work, and sometimes it does work, and sometimes you end up with some real winners like Ty Emberson and Mikael Granlund, and like yeah, keep on doing
I
it.
just think
They
you need
we
a little more direction this summer, though. I think
yeah.
last summer was a little more like, we'll take some from column A, some from column C. We'll see if it works, kind of. And it
Yeah.
didn't work. And so I think now I like every player we've heard so far. There is a certain profile to them: Atkinson, Dellandrea, and Goodrow. And I like all those profiles.
All right. This is a lot of Goodrow talk. Let's do the
Mhm.
top 32 and then let's get out of here because we do have like about an hour long interview with Chris as well. So
Mm.
everybody, you've got a very long episode coming up, which I know is everybody's favorite. They love like 3 hour long episodes.
All right, let's put up that top 32. And now you get to hear Keegan talk. It's not me talking on and on here.
Yeah, you get to ask
Yeah.
questions to me.
Yes.
All right, let me get this. Let me get this going here. I feel like an old person, like an old man, trying to share my screen. You're like in your Zoom meetings, like let me just pull up my screen here. Can everybody see? Okay, great. All
All right.
right, can you see it?
Yeah.
All right, perfect. So
Oh,
on,
you fixed the heights too. Nice.
somewhat a lot of I will
Mostly.
say first off the bat is that this I've been using this spreadsheet to organize my like rankings for about a year now. So
Mhm.
the heights are not up to date. Sometimes the positions are like they play both center and right wing, or they play left wing, right wing, or whatever. So occasionally some of these might be wrong. Just putting that out there.
Okay. And I want to stress again to everybody listening, you mentioned already, but let's stress again that you're looking at this list, that this is Keegan's personal top 32. This is not a mock draft.
Yep. And I should have an article matching this top 32 by the draft, just to kind of talk about each one of these guys and why I like them or why they are slotted where they are. On the very left is the tier shaded in a lovely salmon color. At the very top is Macklin Celebrini in his own tier, then a tier from 2 to 6, 7 to 13, 14 to about 35 is where that tier goes.
What do the tiers mean?
So the first tier, Macklin's tier, is his own. This is a
God
tier. No, it's just your franchise level.
Okay.
Going to be a first line plus player no matter what. I feel like there's just
franchise
not a
player. First line.
Yeah.
Franchise player.
Second tier is possible first line player or first pairing player. That's where I've got them slotted. Third tier is likely second line, possibly like very height of their projection first line or first pairing, but probably second line kind of area.
Yeah, second pairing.
Or second pairing.
Right.
And then the last one is a big clusterfuck. No, it's basically like guys that at the very top of that tier, I think they're middle six guys. And then, one or two of these guys might pop up and be a top six or top four guy, top pairing guy, whoever. But most of these guys I see in that middle six to middle bottom pairing role, somewhere around there.
Okay.
And then each one of these has flaws that could prevent them from getting to there or what. The gold shading and the green shading we're going to talk about, but I wanted to talk about the possible picks at number 14, which is the guys in gold, in green. And then the guys in gold are your possible 33 or 42 picks. So where do you want to start?
Well, it's your chart. So let's see. Well, okay, let's talk about guys that you like at 14 here. You have who might be available too. So obviously, like if Lushunov ends up 14, you're taking him, but he's not going to end up at 14. So
exactly.
In green, you shaded your guys at 14. So what I would ask you here, looking at this, is it's clearly Constant Hellenius is your guy here.
Yes,
but he is the least likely, along with Yakimchuk, to still be around. And so realistically, Yakimchuk and Hellenius are off the board. Do you take Yzerman? Is that your guy? I have a lot of questions about him in terms of everything else besides his shot, and also even the sort of, I think Chris talked about it, just awareness. I think that the general thing I hear is not a bad kid, but what was it that a scout said? Not a bad kid, but on his own page. So who do you pick then if Hellenius and Yakimchuk are off the board at 14?
If it goes exactly like this, and Iginla's gone, Dickinson's gone, Silyaev's gone,
and Senek is gone too. I know, Senek at 14, but I don't think he'll be around, right? So
he'll probably be 10, 8, 9, 10, somewhere around there. So
who do you take then?
Then it's I think that Yzerman has the most chance to be like a 40 goal power play player. That I think you take him. I think there's enough. Okay. I think so. I think there is got a lot of question marks with him, but that he really does have something special in his shot, and I think he's not the best playmaker. He's not a good defensive player. He's not really well-rounded at anything else other than like the way that he shoots the puck, but he does it really, really, really well. And the guys like this, either they get picked way too high or they fall. And then when they fall, they typically do pretty okay. Guys like Cole Caulfield when he fell, but you don't want to reach for him. So you don't want to go like 6-7 with him just because he scores a lot of goals. Or somebody compared him to Oliver Wahlstrom, and that's an interesting comp. But I think Yzerman's got a better shot than Wahlstrom did, first of all. But I think he's a better prospect than Wahlstrom was in his draft year.
And I haven't seen these guys a whole ton. I'll admit, you've watched them all more, but the scouts I talked to, I trust them because the scouts watch these guys and they do it. That's their literal job. And so I trust what they say. Like, with Yzerman,
it's going to be tough.
Things like here, it's not like he's got a great shot and he's also a hardworking kid, great skater or whatever. Like, I hear too many, honestly, like character kind of things that make me question it, that he can reach his ceiling as a scorer. Like some guys, like they have this one skill, their shot, but then they have other kind of intangibles or whatever, right? and that they can bring to the table, that they can make their defense just average. They can get their skating to just average. And they do that, then their shot can stand out at NHL level. But I don't know if he's got that other stuff. And you didn't
there are a
ask
lot
me,
of concerns.
but I take Solberg. I know that's like the safe pick, but that's me. But anyway, go on. This is your segment.
No, I mean that's also why he's shady green, is that the Sharks also really, I don't know if they need Yzerman right now. Like it would be cool if he hits, and then he's a great shot that, and he's also, there's like the Celebrini connection kind of thing. But I don't know if they need him, and they really do need a defender. So guys like Solberg, Jiricek, Yakimchuk, if they're available somewhere, maybe they're a better
Yakimchuk would be first for me. Hellenius, then it would be Hellenius for me.
Yeah.
And then it'll be Solberg. I take Solberg over Brenzig Nygaard because I think their ceilings are similar-ish in terms of their impact. But
would you take Yzerman over Nygaard, or would you go for the more safe?
No, I go Nygaard. Yzerman, I would not touch unless he fell. I mean, it'd be crazy, but unless he fell, so like 233. So.
To 33. So would you go into like the 20s for him? I guess is a good question. Like if
I
you could trade.
I wouldn't trade him. I wouldn't trade 33 and 42 for him. So.
There are things with this game that is huge holes and flaws that he's gonna have to work on.
It's not like he skates well too. Like I said, if there's other things, it's just,
he's not horrible, but he's just fine.
I don't know. Yeah, the one of the stories, one of the scouts says his skating mechanics are what, I don't know what the phrase he used, but just his skating mechanics are really messed up, according to this guy. So but anyway,
he needs time. He really does. But I think that a lot of things is with this draft, once you get past that range that we're talking about here, it starts to dip off pretty quickly in terms of elite talent and elite skill. So I don't know. I'd have to think about it for a while. And every year I do I pick a player that at that whatever the Sharks are picking, and I pick it real time. So we'll see who's available for 14 that I pick at the time.
Okay.
Because it's got to be real time, and it's exactly whatever the Sharks are like looking at on a board. Because if you do it retroactively,
we're talking about this like YouTube too, but like people are listening, they don't know what we're talking about. So
that's true. You got to watch on YouTube. I apologize, everybody on.
So let's rattle off the list really fast.
Sure.
So people know at least. All right. So do you want to read all of them, or do you want me to alternate with you? So there's.
Okay. Why do we do this? I'll start from the top. Okay. Macklin Celebrini, Ivan Demidov, Steve Buyam, Artem Levshinov, Berkeley Catton is my top 5.
Yeah. In order.
In order. Caden Lindstrom is 6. He's like right in that middle between like the next tier and that tier above it.
Right. Basically, Macklin Celebrini God tier 2 through 6 is sort of your first line tier, right? From Demidov to Lidstrom. Yep. I'm trying to narrate it for people just listening. So.
And then 7 to 13, it's Hellenius, Perek, Iginla, Dickinson, Silyaev, Yzerman, and Yakimchuk.
Right, and these are your like likely second line / middle pairing guys for you. So.
Yep, and then 14 to 35, but only 32 is listed on here, is Seneca, Brendazeg Nygaard, Greentree, Luchenko, Solberg, Basha, Jiricek, Hage, Chernyshev, Parasek, Ritchie, Baudouin, Artemanov, Badinka, Hudson, Kiviharyu, Salin Wallenius, Massey, and Hemming.
Yeah, just to read off some of these like ones that really stand out to me. And this is your kind of maybe they'll be second line, but maybe middle 6, maybe middle pairing, just not as strong as the upper tier, not as likely in your opinion. But few that stand out here to me are, we'll talk about them in a second, but 19 Basha, 23 Parasek, just guys that are a little higher, that maybe you're a little bit higher on that we can spotlight in a little bit. 28 Hudson, 29 Kiviharyu. So those are a few that stand out. But I also want to mention too that we just talked about 14, and so there are 6 guys here that Keegan's got: Hellenius, Yzerman, Yakimchuk, Brandzik, Nygaard, Solberg, and Jiricek that might be there at 14. Mm-hmm. And so that's sort of who we're talking about right now, that he likes the best. And so anyways, just to catch everybody up who can't see this chart in front of them. But let's talk about 33 then. You have a few guys here that in yellow here.
Mm-hmm. Well, first I want to say one thing about Hellenius, because I think that he's the one that is most likely to come out of this is like on a bunch of mocks, he ends up in the 12 to or sometimes 10 to
Right,
14
13,
range.
14,
And I have
right?
him on the upper end of that tier because I really, really like him as a player. And I think he has a lot of NHL qualities already that, and he's not particularly tiny. He's like 5'11", and he's going to play center. Like the guy plays a center role right
Right,
now in a men's league. So I think if he's available at 14 somehow, I would take him all day, every day. Just want to put
right,
that out there because there's
right.
some
And
chance
more
that he
so than
could.
Yakimchuk, clearly, right? Because Yakimchuk is 12 or 13 on your ranking. So
Agreed. Yeah, I would. I think he's more likely to hit his ceiling as like a second line center than Yakimchuk is like a possible power play quarterback, second line forward or
right,
second
right.
line defender. So the next one, the pick 33. Let's talk about Jet Luchenko because I want to plant a flag for Jet Luchenko first of all. So I think I've been talking about it for a little while now, and it seems like he's risen up charts, risen up like boards from scouts for past couple months.
Yeah, he might be a candidate for 14 at this point, right? From
Yeah,
things I see. So yeah,
I think he's a little undersized. Like he's like 5'11", and he's very young. He's like 2 weeks away from being draft eligible next year. And he was on a very not a bad team, but like a mediocre-ish team that didn't have a lot of offensive pop, and he was it. He was like the only guy. But there's a lot
How
of
about Luchenko is 17 on your board? Just reminding everyone who's listening. So yeah, 17.
very high. I think
Yeah.
he started, and this was probably before Christmas, in like the 30s, 40s range for everybody pretty much, and then it's just kind of been going up and up. And I like that kind of rise. I think he might. There's a theoretical chance that he falls into the 33 pick. I think it's more likely he gets
You
picked in
think
the
so?
20s.
Yeah.
But if he's there, I'd take him 100%. Like there's no question. I think everybody else is gone. He's the one.
And we actually talked about. We were just talking before the podcast that if the Sharks were, I'm going to write about this too. The Sharks were going to trade 33 and 42 just to move up into the late first
Mhm.
round. And looking at Puckpedia's draft value pick chart, 33 and 42 equate to 22, basically Nashville 22, right?
Yep.
That who in that sort of cluster of prospects that are most likely to be there, that who would you trade 33 and 42 for? And Keegan said pretty much only Luchenko of
And
most
Hage. I did say
Hage.
Hage.
Right? Hage was your maybe guy, right? But
Mhm.
Luchenko for sure, right?
Mhm.
And so yeah, anyway, so he likes Jet Luchenko a lot. So
I do. I'm putting my flag for Jetlichenko.
yes,
I will say that these are the kind of guys that are just very energetic, good skaters, 200-foot players that have a good amount of skill that sometimes I miss on. Like not miss, but I overvalue a little bit in the OHL and in the CHL in general, and then look back on and go, I guess he didn't have enough. Like he's just smarter right now than everybody, but there wasn't enough of an elite talent to really get him to carve out much of an NHL role. But Luchenko is also an extremely good skater, so he does have some backup hard skill or hard something that's going to make him go forward
sure.
among levels. So I don't know. I overrate him a bit. I like Andrew Basha a lot, but I think he's way more likely to be picked at 33 than he
Yeah,
is
I like your
14.
pick. Sorry to interrupt here, but yeah, Basha at 19. So just if you're listening, so that's very very high because most things I've seen Basha is sort of
20s,
early
maybe
second
30.
round, late first, right? But early second too, right? And so
Yeah.
anyway, so tell us you're planting your flag here. So
Yeah, I like Vasha a lot. I think when I go back and I watched his team, he had extremely good forwards around him, right? He's got like Gavin McKenna and Kaden Lindstrom, Thomas Mersak, who's going to be picked in like the third or fourth round, who's a great shooter. And Basha was he kind of was like the play connector a lot of the times. He was the guy that more peripheral, more playmaking, but very smart, very intelligent. And I think there's a lot of skill there that kind of gets overlooked because Gavin McKenna and Caden Lindstrom stole the spotlight for him. But whenever I would watch the game, I would go, "Who's that guy? Oh, it's Basha again, doing something smart." And I just I think he's getting a little undervalued because of that kind of thing. So if he's there at 33, I think that's an exciting pick because it's
that
more
seems like
possible.
your go-to pick, your likely pick, right? Yeah,
I think it's a good swing
yeah.
of a very high skilled forward that might be getting overlooked a little bit.
hmm
Hage is a cool one as well, but I think he's going to get picked in the 20s no matter what.
Yeah, he might be gone. You have him at 21, right? He could be
Yeah.
gone in the even the high teens, right? So
what I like about Hage is he skates like similarly to Philip Bistad. Like he's got very good straight line speed with the puck, so he can carry the puck really well. He's a little less like Bistad was defensively more responsible and also like yeah, okay, but Hage is a little bit more got a better shot and a better offensive player than I think Bistad was even now. So it's a projection. But I like they seem similar to me when I watch them on the ice. So I might be somebody that Grier could like just because of the way that he liked the B-Stat pick in 2022.
Also, too, Tage seems like a guy, from what I understand, that there's a bit of a offensive ceiling with him, a good one, and
Mm-hmm.
so he might go along the lines of your Musty and your Haltonens, guys that have some drawbacks, but if they hit that, they're going to be better than just your third line types.
Yeah, he's got a chance that if everything works out and he really rounds into form, that he's like a possible second line center. But a lot's got to work out for him.
Yeah.
He's still very, very raw. A lot of the USHL kids this year are super raw. And the USHL is not a league that prioritizes defense at all. So it's hard to kind of gauge what their total 200-foot effectiveness is. Couple other guys, speaking of like, gotta be a bottom six forward, Cole Baudouin is gonna be a bottom six
25
forward.
on your list, yeah.
But he's just he's the kind of guy that like NHL teams love in the playoffs, and he's the kind of guy that they overpay for at the deadline, and they fill their third and fourth line with great grinding player that has a little bit of skill and can still move pucks and big, hits hard. So he's a guy that I think a team might reach on too early. But if he's at 33, it's like a certain point in the draft, you just need to get NHL guys, I think, and he's going to be a guy, I think. Dominic Badinka is another one that I have at
27 on your list.
27. He's a big right shot defender. He played the entire year in the SHL pretty much as a 18-year-old kid. He didn't put up a lot of points there, like 4 points in 30 something games, but he played a lot of minutes, sometimes like 17, 18 minutes a night, and that's hard to do for that age in that league. Right. But he's very calm. He fits like the mold of a like maybe he stepped like honestly like a Sharks comparable would be somebody like Middleton, if you wanted to use like that kind of guy, bigger, calm, moves the puck well. Yeah, Jake Middleton. Okay. Moves the puck well. Doesn't have a ton of offense, but has enough to get like good outlet passes, and he plays defense very well. What I liked about him, and we talked about this off air before we started, was when he went to the J20s, like when he went down a league, he like just tried a bunch of offensive shit that he never tries in the SHL. Like he looked like a different player almost, and I kind of like that because like I think he's just simplified his game so much to be able to play in the SHL right now that I was kind of worried that like maybe there's not enough there offensively to really justify a first round pick, but I think there is. He just can't do it right now, and he needs a little bit more time adjusting to the level he's at right now. So I think there's something there with Badinka. Couple like I just realized I have like Hudson and Kiviharu right back to back. That's funny.
Oh yeah, I mean that kind of they kind of fit together, right? You seem to like Hudson and Kiviharu more than most people.
Yeah, I mean Hudson I think has been somewhere from the 20s to 40s. I think people are worried that he's gonna take off like his brother did, and like they're gonna miss out. So there's a chance, and I think this year the class isn't that as deep. So I think somebody might take a chance on him in the early second. So if the Sharks do get they get a big defender in their 14th pick and Hudson's there at 33 or 42, maybe they go for it. And then I think Kiviharu has a lot of doubters because he had a really not poor year, but just not a great year in his draft year, but multiple prior years he looked great. So the people worry about the progression, but there's still a lot of skill there, and he's a very smart defender, but he's very tiny. He's very small. So you got to weigh all of those out, and I think he's still worthy. He has first-round talent. I think there's just concerns with his bad year and his size that maybe he falls into the second. So, or he probably will fall into the second, to be honest. But this was a guy that was like a top 5 pick projected this year, and now he's like
Right.
top
Yeah.
45.
Yeah, I know he's had a tough year. So,
Mm-hmm.
so okay, so we know you love Luchenko, but he's probably not going to be here. So 33, Bash is your guy then, probably, of your likely guys who will be around.
Yeah, if Bash is there at 33, I think I would take him because everybody else above that is going to be gone. Solberg, Luchenko, Greentree, Brandon, all of them are going to be gone. I would take Basha. And
trying to think who I would take here. I don't know. I may not take anybody from here. I'll look at.
Yeah, there are many other rankings that have this group.
I don't expect
all
Hage
around.
to be around. I don't expect Baldwin to be around. So maybe Badinka.
Badinka might be around because
Badinka is more likely to be around. Yeah.
Yeah, I think. But again, it's the same question or the same statement that we had, or that you're going to see on the Chris interview. Like, 6'3" right shot defenders don't last long if they can skate pretty well, and it's the same thing with Badinka, especially ones that were playing in a men's league. Somebody else trying to scoop him up. I think. I like Ryder Ritchie, Tarek Parasak, all of these like skill wingers. I think they might slip as well, just because there's a lot of the guys.
Yeah,
like
why are they marked gold? Is it just because you don't think the Sharks would consider them? They don't sound like Shark profile in your. Is that why you didn't mark?
Ryder Ritchie might. I don't know about. I mean, Parasak is like a jack of all trades kind of guy. Like he does have. He's got a nose for the net. He's very simple at his game, but he has some skill, and he came out of nowhere this year. So maybe they like it, but I think I feel like they're gonna take a guy that's gonna. I don't know. And then this is kind of a mix of like what the Sharks would do versus what I would do as well.
Oh, right.
This gold tier
doesn't sound like a Sharks.
No, not really. Luchenko does. Bash not really.
Luchenko's got some of that compete and all-around game, whereas Basha is skilled, right? But maybe they want a little more size, which you get in Hage. So Hage, I can see a little bit more.
Yep. Baudouin as well has got the compete level.
Determination.
Him, Bodinka, Luchenko, Hage, all of them, if any of them are available at 33, I think you take them. That's it. It's an exciting draft. I think it's a little less deep than last year. Like I remember last year when I was going out into like the 60s and 70s and being like, damn, this guy's really good. This year it's like the maybe 45s, somewhere around there. Like that I'm like, this guy's still really good.
Oh, Sharks are in a good place then, right? Because 42 to 85, it's going to be a long wait between those picks as Sharks don't trade up or trade down or whatever. So they're in the right place with 4 picks in the top 45 right there.
Yeah, that's just perfect. Because right after that, I think you're starting to take swings on overage guys and like guys with lots of holes and lots of flaws. And that's every draft. But last year felt a little deeper all the way through. In the first round, I was like, this is a rock solid first round last year. And like we got Quinton Musty at 26 last year. That's a rock solid first round. And this year is a little less deep, I think. Once you really get past 14, 15, which is where the Sharks' second pick lies, that level of this guy could really hit to a top 6 role kind of drops off pretty hard, in my opinion. But this is just me. I'm one dude on the San Jose Hockey Now podcast. But I don't know if you've been hearing the same thing from people too.
About what?
About the depth of the draft overall.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's pretty. There's sort of a consensus 13. Yzerman would be there, but I think there's just too many questions about the other stuff. It's not just that he's an offense only guy, like I said. There's other stuff that you've read or I've alluded to, right just right now, right? That just like causing him to pause. And so
I think Button's super high on him. I think he's got him like 5.
Oh yeah,
right?
Button. I think had him 5th. I think on his personal ranking. So
so
Button's very high on him. And then we get down to one guy I talked to thinks that's maybe a little more top 35 that he feels good about instead of top 45. Like it's still around the same. You guys are talking about the same thing though, that somewhere around the second round, then it's like, then you're just sort of taking long shots in a way. So more long shots. Any draft pick is a long shot, but
I got a few more, and then we should stop just to rattle off some names. I like Thomas Galvis, undersized.
Oh, these are guys not in your top 32.
Yeah, these are just like other guys. Thomas Galvis, he's like an undersized. He's like 5'11", I think. defender, Czech defender. Very, very calm, very good defensively. Has
Where do you
decent.
see him more?
He's probably
Third,
like a
fourth
third or
pick?
fourth round pick.
Okay.
By most people, I think. But he's very smart. I've watched him for a couple years now, and I really like him as a rock solid defensive type. It's just hard to place him because he's so tiny. Not tiny, but he's also not physical. So these guys don't get picked early. But I like him as a player. I like Anthony Romani. I actually liked Anthony Romani last year when he was draft eligible. I watched him when Brandon Coe was with North Bay. And I was like, oh, that kid's got a bit of skill. And he was like 16 at the time. And I kept a note of him. His draft year last year, he just did not have, he's not very quick. So he's like okay with his speed, but his game, it didn't progress enough in his draft year to get drafted. So he was undrafted last year. This year, complete offensive explosion. And he was like leading the OHL in points for most of the year. And I was like, damn. And I mentioned actually in my draft write-up last year about Anthony Romani, it's like maybe you take a flyer on him because you know that there's skill there, but he had a really bad year. I wrote that up last year, then he exploded. So I want to put another flag that I still like Anthony Romani if you can get him in like the 4th or 5th round.
Okay.
But he might get picked earlier than that just because this draft isn't super, super deep. Who else? Jesse Polkinen's a fun defender from Finland.
Oh yeah, I was just listening to what a couple of scouts, my sources were saying about him, because he's going to be in a story that I'm coming out with.
What did they say about
that
him?
Sharks just couldn't in the second round. I love his story. Yeah, basically, a guy who was awful in his draft year.
Yeah, it was really bad.
Came back in better shape, and actually, not only is he big and he can skate, but he has skill.
Yeah, for sure, he definitely does. He's got hard skill. So. He's going to get picked early, I think, just because, not early, like in the second round, somewhere someone's going to fall in love with him.
33 and 42. He sounds like he could be a good Sharks pickup at 42, maybe, right? So.
Yeah, if he's there, I think it's a really cool gamble that they could take. I like that a lot. It's a complete turnaround from who he was as a prospect. Yeah. So a couple more. I like Thomas Mersak. I mentioned him earlier. Great shot. Decent elsewhere, kind of smart, does grind, has good forechecking. But he's good, a great shot, and he's probably going to be like a 4th rounder.
4th rounder?
Yeah. I liked Edwin Nielsen, but I liked him more last year than I did this year. He's a good, decent skater.
He's an overage guy?
No. He's a this draft year. It's just he was on a team of a prospect I watched last year.
I got you. Okay.
So he's a first-time eligible, but he just didn't have a good draft year. He's a defender out of Sweden. Didn't put up a lot of points. Didn't really progress a lot, but I still think there's skill there. He'll probably be like a 6th round pick, maybe 5th, 6th.
Wow, we're going real sleeper here.
Yeah, Adam Jecko is a probably 2nd rounder.
Yeah, it looks like he's rising. Yeah,
big winger out of the WHL. I like him. Good shot as well. He's probably going to rise a little bit. Alphonse Frage gets a ton of Twitter love.
Right.
There's a huge debate between Leo Salin-Wallenius and Alphonse Frage, because they're both defenders out of Sweden. I like, and this is going to be controversial, I like Salin-Wallenius more than Alphonse Frage.
Yeah, well, he's on your list, and Frage is not. So.
Yeah, Frage is he's like 36, I think, so he's not like too far off. I think Salin-Wallenius plays a more projectable NHL game than Frage does. I think Frage he's more athletic and he's raw as a prospect, and people like that. But I don't think he's the most intelligent player. But I think Salin-Wallenius is a very safe NHL floor, like bottom-ish pairing kind of guy. That's why I put him up into here. So if you're looking for that as at 33 or 42, I think that's also a possibility. But I like him a lot. And that's I mean, there's a couple more that I really like, but for now I think that's enough.
Okay, well, you've planted your flag, so when these guys become
or they bust horribly,
you can start your own website like Brian Bader did. So
yeah,
and
or
get
they
hired
bust
by a team eventually. So
yeah, or they bust horribly, and then I and go,
well,
oh wow,
yeah, this never happened then.
Yeah, that's why I do the every year I do the picks that the Sharks have done, just because I like to check the guys. Like, and I don't like some people are like, oh, I loved what's his name in his draft year, and it's like that. I want to prove that. I want to put out my thing that I chose this guy so much I loved him. You know, like I chose Rodwin Dionisio in the 7th on 2022, the year before he was drafted, because it was his draft year, and then the last year, he was like the best defenseman in the CHL probably, and just got signed with the Ducks on his ELC. So like, yeah, I felt good about that one because I got him a year before everybody else did, before the Ducks got him. And but I miss a lot too. So and Thomas Sakanik, I got him on my team. So
yeah.
I got it's my own little like side project that I do. I think the
Yeah, we should talk about one day. Yeah, maybe off season. That's a good post draft kind of talk. Some of your hits and misses over the years.
Yeah, compared to the Sharks in the same time period, it's a lot of fun to look back and see. Oh wow, they did have something in Eric Polkamp that I didn't see and stuff like that, because they do have some good ones.
I asked you this before. How long have you been drafting on your own?
Just 2 years.
Personally, 2 years. Okay.
Yeah, I've been doing lists since 2021. So I did a list in 2021, 2, 3, and then this year. But I've only been doing the thing 2022.
Like picking right when the Sharks pick and seeing what's available and just taking your guy.
Yep. Yeah, since 2022. Okay. So just 2 years. So this will be the third year.
This will be the third year of it. Okay.
But there's been some good returns. So one day we'll go through it when we don't have anything else to talk about in the off season.
No, it sounds good. Yeah, maybe another year or two of more information.
Yeah. I got a few good names on there, and then they're all backed up on Twitter. So I post it the same time the Sharks do on Twitter, and I'll do that again this year if I've got the moments during the draft when we're going to be there. So
sounds good.
All right, guys. Enjoy the Chris Peters interview. It was very insightful.
It's a great one. Just my tease to it that he called a prospect evil, and it wasn't Trevor Connolly.
It was not Trevor. He did talk about Trevor Connolly, and also not on my list is Trevor Connolly.
But anyway, though, it's a great interview. Great stuff. It's actually a prospect that I've been told that the Sharks like, that he called evil.
He's a little evil. He's pretty fun.
That's the tease. Don't say who. They can listen. I also have a story coming out about it too. So
yeah, he's a little evil. It's pretty good. He also called a unnamed prospect like Sidney Crosby. I don't know who it would be, but
this one you might know.
Yeah, you might know that one. And he's also not evil. All right, we will see you guys at the draft. That's our next. Yes. That's our next episode. It'll probably be at the draft, theoretically.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Bye, guys. Hope you have a good week. This week, we welcome back Chris Peters, senior content creator at Flow Hockey, NHL Draft and Prospect Analyst, and the host of the Talking Hockey Sense podcast, to talk all about the upcoming draft, who he thinks the Sharks might be interested in at picks 14, 33, and 42. Welcome back, Chris.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Good to be with you.
Well, Chris, we got to get started. Let's get started hot here, all right? In a recent article, you said Macklin Celebrini is Sidney Crosby. Explain.
Well, I didn't say he is Sidney Crosby or is going to become Sidney Crosby. But I mean, when we're talking, I did an exercise where basically I had to, my whole goal was to pick NHL comparables for current NHL players. So
current NHL players, okay.
Because like there was one time in the draft where literally every top two-way center prospect was being compared to Steve Yzerman. And I was like, I'm not doing that again. But Macklin Celebrini, Steve Yzerman. No, I'm just kidding. So the reason that I picked Crosby for Macklin's comp is because I view a lot of the similarities in Macklin's game to Crosby's, in that high-end hockey sense, elite level competitiveness, two-way commitment. The fact that he is an incredibly skilled player, but he picks and chooses when and how to use that elite skill the same way that Crosby does. He's a goal scorer, but he's also a playmaker. He is a play driver. He is a guy that is going to impact the game in so many ways. While I don't think he's ever going to reach the Crosby echelon in terms of the very top of his production, I do think that we're talking about a player that's going to impact games in a very similar way, and that when he's on the ice, he's going to more often than not be the best player on it. And I'm glad I'm on your podcast because I can say this and let you guys, salivate. Like, I still feel like people are underrating Macklin Celebrini, if that's possible. I feel like when I hear about him, I was like, he is the most complete player I have, like, number one prospect that I have done this for. Like I've been doing this since 2011. And I just can't think of anybody else that checks as many boxes as Celebrini does. The only one he doesn't check is height. And it's not like he's small. Sidney Crosby, also 5'11", so it's like, that's the thing that he's physical, he's mean, he handles pressure well, he's poised, he's mature, he carries himself a certain way. He's kind of soft-spoken in the same way that Crosby was at the beginning of his career, but he speaks loudly on the ice with his actions. So as I look across the landscape of the NHL, Jonathan Toews didn't play last year, so he wasn't eligible. So, but I think we're talking about a player that's somewhere between Toews and Crosby, if we're using that as a scale. And to me, like, the reason that we don't talk about Celebrini as much as we did about Bedard last year is because Bedard's best attributes are the flashiest parts of hockey: scoring goals, creating offense. Macklin Celebrini's best attributes are everything. Like, it's just literally every element of the game. There is no weakness to him. And that is, I couldn't even try to pick him apart if I wanted to, because I've watched him for 2 years and I've seen a player that's only gotten better. And, maybe I'm overhyping him. I don't know. I just feel like, I'm not saying that he's the best prospect, because that was Connor McDavid. I mean, nobody has ever come close to that. But I'm saying he's in that conversation. I wrote a piece earlier in the year, right around the time of the Frozen Four, or right after it, that Macklin Celebrini is way closer to Connor Bedard than anyone is talking about in terms of his overall impact on the team. They're going to impact the game in different ways. Bedard will probably always outscore him. But Celebrini is going to do the things away from the puck. And like, he's the type of player that creates a team identity as opposed to fits into a team identity. Sure. That's the kind of guy you want to play like. I think he's a franchise cornerstone. I think to me, I said this on another podcast, that I thought that the most important day in San Jose Sharks history, beyond becoming a franchise, was winning the draft lottery this year.
Wow.
It really felt like it.
That's my, so hype away. I am not slowing down the Macklin Celebrini hype train. I am shoveling coal into it. And then also throwing nuclear energy into that train.
Boom.
So,
yeah, I was just messing with you with the Crosby comp, but you took the hype in a different way than the Crosby. That article, by the way, is AHL player comps for Max Celebrini and other top prospects from June 17th from Chris. My question related to it is just in terms of, this might be a little tough one to answer, but I wonder what comes to mind for you is when you look at a Celebrini compared to a Crosby. And you mentioned the Toews comp too. When you talk about Toews, then you start to think about players, some still playing, some retired, like Patrice Bergeron, current players like Andrei Kopitar and Barkov. What are just little things that are maybe different about Celebrini than some of those names that I mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that Mac has proven over time is he was targeted in a way that I don't think he was the youngest player in college hockey, and yet every single team was trying to knock him out of a game. They were basically trying to knock him out of the week, and there were a couple of times where he took some big hits and some headshots and different things. And Jay Pandolfo was like, hey, like, this kid is getting absolutely crushed. The thing that always struck me about Macklin Celebrini, he never once complained about it, and he gave it right back just as hard as he did. I think there is an underlying meanness to Macklin Celebrini. You talk to him, and he is a nice young man.
Yes, he is very nice.
He is so nice.
A lot of patience with my questions.
Yeah, he is an exceptionally mature individual, but he will carve you if he needs to. And that, to me, is one of the separating factors. And like, the thing is like, his approach, his demeanor, like, I just feel that there's Toews elements to that. But yeah, I mean, I think for him there's that. And then it's just, he's one of the better goal scorers among those top defensive forwards. He's got a great shot from distance, an elite one-timer, power play weapon. You can set him up on one of the face-off circles, and he's gonna, blow it by the goalie. I think that the fact that he's such a gifted goal scorer while not giving away much defensively is really impressive. And I think at the peak of Taves' career, he was in that kind of same echelon. Patrice Bergeron was more of the playmaker, less of the goal scorer. Barkov is a little bit of both, but he's bigger, just a little sturdier and things like that. Sure. So he's able to play the game a bit differently. But to me, I just think that Celebrini's inner competitiveness is something that is always evident, and it's why he's so consistent. And there wasn't a game this season where he looked ineffective. I mean, even the games where he didn't score, it was just like he's a threat. That Frozen Four game that they lost, he was everywhere. They did not lose that game because he had a great scoring chance that he narrowly missed, but it was a really tough angle. But I was like, he's going to put him on his back and he's going to try. It just so happened that the team they were playing was just too good. So but Celebrini to me is he's a special player, and I've really enjoyed covering him the last couple of years. We at Flow Hockey, we did the first national feature on him, with our video crew, and you could tell then this kid was going to be something special, and now here he is.
Because you mentioned this a second ago, where most important day in franchise history might be winning Celebrini. If you can only win one, is there any kind of argument that winning the Celebrini lottery was better than winning the Bedard lottery for San Jose?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I think
you need some strong two-way centers, and maybe Bedard might not be that.
You do. I mean, I think having Will Smith as your dynamic duo, your 1-2 punch, that does change it a little bit. Like if you didn't have that already, which last year you wouldn't have had, having a player with the elite scoring. The thing is, like, Bedard is generational in the goal scoring department. It's and that to me is where you can create separation. And it's like, if you ask me who I thought was going to have a better career, I might give the slight edge to Bedard, but that's because he's going to impact the game in a much more visible point. He's probably going to have a ton of trophies. He's probably going to have, like a lot of those individual awards. And the reason that I think that this is the significance of Celebrini is multifold. Obviously, there's the familial connection to the Bay Area that is, really recent, in terms of his whole, you look at the totality of his life. It wasn't like he grew up there, but it's about as close as you can get to having a homegrown kind of talent for your team. The fact that his family is already a part of Bay Area sports greatness is pretty cool too. But I also think that, since he was a junior Shark, there's that added element of this is a kid that's going to inspire the next generation of Sharks fans in a way that, no disrespect to Thornton and Marlowe, who certainly did their share, but this is a different animal. Like, this is a different kind of thing. And if both Macklin Celebrini and Will Smith are your Kane and Taves, or your Crosby and Malkin, or whatever, which it's possible that those two guys, because we're talking about the two best players, in college hockey last year, even though Will Smith was not a Hobey Baker finalist, he should have been. And he outscored Macklin, but he is older than Macklin. So, there's all these different things, but we're talking about two of the best, like, historic seasons in college hockey from two guys in your own organization. The sky is the limit for where this is going to go. So adding Celebrini on top of already having Smith is why that matters. Bedard would have certainly added more attention. And like we're seeing right now, Celebrini's not getting the same level of hype that Bedard did. So that's a whole other, that's a short-term win.
Yeah.
So, I still think it would have been marginally better to get Bedard, but this is so good. Like, it's just so good to have it. And I think it's when we look at the franchise timelines, this is going to be a flashpoint in Sharks history, no question.
and then they draft Anton Silyaev with the first overall.
Yes.
No.
He's already confirmed. Pretty much. I think Grier said Macklin in a press conference like last week.
Yeah.
So
Which means
Anyway.
it's a ruse.
yeah. All right, we'll move on from number one because the
We
mystery
can talk about
is
Macklin for 30 minutes. Apparently,
that's true.
but,
We could. But the mystery is already kind of solved. The big mystery for the Sharks fans starts at pick number 14. I think that's when everybody's kind of aiming their putting their sights on. So in your mock draft that you put out recently, you had the Sharks taking Stian Solberg. So I guess the first question is, why Stian Solberg?
Well, I think with that pick, you're starting to look at, building out a team, right? You're not just building out a, you can do best player available, but if you're not building with team, balance to your team, then you're not doing the job properly. The reason I have Solberg is because I think in the later stages of this year, and when I do a mock draft, I try to get as much intel as I can. The truth of the matter is it's really difficult to get accurate information that is actually gonna, especially when you're like having all these picks and there are going to be blind spots and it's going to change the order of different things. So you never really know how it's going to go. My mock draft blew up at pick 2 last year. So, it's the way it goes sometimes. All it takes is one pick to destroy everything.
Yep.
So I always say the mock draft is not necessarily don't take it as gospel, take it as a range, an idea of who's there. And so Solberg is a late riser in the draft. He had a tremendous world championship. He is a defensive defenseman, but really good mobility, 6'2", physical, mean, nasty. And then I think at the world championship, he showed that he's capable of moving pucks. He can get into the play. They had him on their power play unit. He's able to do things that I think, will translate. He's moved to the SHL for next season, so he's not going to be in Norway like he was this year, because really it's pretty much unheard of to be drafted first and drafted at all out of the Norwegian league, let alone in the first round. But Solberg had enough moments in the last couple of seasons where teams were like, there's something there. And he's really jumped up. So he's not the next defenseman on my list. But I think just judging by the way that things are blowing and judging by the things I was hearing out of the combine, a lot of people think that Solberg is going to be a top 15 pick in the draft.
Yeah.
And because of that, and because of the need that the Sharks have at defense, and because basically 14 is where it really starts to kind of get shaky in terms of the quality of the class, because I think the first 13, 14 picks, the 14 players that we've been talking about are largely the same player. I don't think it's like a reach to go for a defenseman here. It's not like hopping over something. But when you look at the system and you say, okay, well, you have Henry Therun, you have Shakir Mukhamadullin, you need more. You just do. You need a lot more. And to me, I think that the best opportunity for the Sharks there is to, get a guy that's got some real pro traits, some top 4 caliber attributes, and see where it goes. But I mean, the other thing is that with a late riser like Solberg, and with so few opportunities to see him against real tip-top competition, it's, you're rolling the dice a little bit on the projection. But I do think that the buzz on him, especially coming out of the combine where he apparently crushed his interviews, teams just fell in love with him there. And I could see the Sharks being one of them.
Do you think that because the Sharks, you're right, don't have a ton of defensive depth in their pipeline at all, but does he have enough offense to really justify picking him with that 14th pick is, I guess, the question.
I mean, I think he just has that. He's an NHL defenseman, I think, does he have enough offense? I think it still remains to be seen. I think you're doing a lot of projecting on his offensive game.
Sure.
But when he has time and space, he seems to do fine. It's just, we know in the NHL, you don't have a lot of time and space. So the thing about it is like, you look at the other defensemen in that range too. And again, this is maybe there's an opportunity even to trade down or something like that if you wanted to. And because I think there's a lot of value in that 14th pick. But, I look at Adam Juracek and I say, well, he's got some offensive capability. It's not like I'd call him an offensive defenseman either, but he also missed half the season. Yeah. And I don't know how he's going to come back from this injury. He still hasn't even started skating yet. Yeah. So, that's another thing where you're just like, that's more risk. So Solberg might be too safe a pick, maybe, but I think this is a guy that's going to play NHL games and he's going to help you win games because he's got that nastiness to him. He's got that defensive capability. And then, you still have high picks in the second round. I think that next cluster of defensemen is really interesting as well. The guys that'll be available in the late first, early second. That's another thing. So, so it's a fair point to raise in terms of the offense, but it's also, what else do you need? You need guys that can play on your blue line, and I think Solberg can.
You mentioned that Solberg wasn't necessarily, though, your personally ranked next defenseman. So who do you have above him in sort of that maybe second tier of defenders?
Yeah, well, this is one where I always remind people that, there's a certain amount of risk that I'm willing to take in making a list where I'm not actually picking a team. And so it would be Juracek, but it's based on a very limited amount of views. And also I would say that while his international showings this year and some of his games last year were really impressive, his start to the season before he got hurt was only okay. It wasn't amazing. And the Czech league is notoriously difficult for young defensemen to do much in. But he was playing a pretty regular shift and he was, doing it against men. He was more than holding his own. And then unfortunately got hurt immediately at the World Juniors. And so that's a huge evaluation opportunity missed when he was going to be playing massive minutes. But we go back to the Hlinka Gretzky Cup and it's like, he was a big reason that the Czech team won silver. They did not place at the World Under 18s. They were bad at the World Under 18s and he wasn't there. And his absence was felt significantly by that team.
And like you mentioned, one draft pick and suddenly the whole order goes awry. And so I wonder about guys that maybe could drop to 14, that your Konsta Helenius, who I think you had 13 in your mock, and of course Carter Yakimchuk, who might be considered the kind of the last defenseman of the elite top tier defenseman in this draft. And so if one of those guys drops, do you take one of those guys ahead of Solberg?
Oh yeah.
No question.
Absolutely. No question. The way that the mock draft worked out, it was like all the premium talents are gone. The one that was there that you could potentially consider was Cole Yzerman.
Yeah, no.
but I just think that there's enough risk there.
Yeah.
That might not be the fit. Even though, hey, he and Mac are good buddies, you got the relationship. That's cool. Great story. Maybe a little bit more exciting when you tell all your fans you got a guy that scored 127 goals in the national team development program. But I think that there's real concern about whether or not he's going to ultimately be a top line scoring winger. And if he isn't, is he a top 9 scoring winger? And then all of a sudden you're like, that's not the kind of player that we pick at 14.
And so even a forward at Helenius or I don't know, a Catton or somebody like falls like that, that's a clear over Solberg. So it's kind of
easily, yeah.
Your draft in your mind is the first 13 picks almost.
Correct.
And then San Jose has sort of like the first pick again of the second tier.
Yeah, because I mean, I think even in the weeks since I dropped my ranking, I probably would have moved Yzerman down even more. Because after the combine, things do move incrementally,
right?
And
how were his interviews at the combine? I never asked him about that.
It was mixed. I think it was I heard mixed reports. I think one of the things that one of the concerns that I've heard from scouts about him is kind of a lack of self-awareness in terms of what he needs to work on and where his defensive game really is. And you also wonder, is that something where he, he's been told one thing, but it actually it's not going as well as maybe he's being told, like that's the thing, is like a lot of teams still feel like, there are clear deficiencies in his game that he may not be as familiar with.
So it kind of feels like the there's that crop of, like we just mentioned, that there's a crop of like 13 players. Then there's also some risks like Yzerman or Connolly, and then there's another group after that of forwards like Luchenko and stuff like that, where maybe you take Solberg just because the Sharks really probably don't need another middle six or potential middle six scorer. They really need a defenseman.
Yeah, and that's basically what it came down to. What is the pick that will make the most impact for the franchise? And a middle six forward would be great. They can make an impact, but if I believe that Solberg is going to be a top, or has, if the top of his projection is top 4 defenseman, that's a more valuable commodity at that point. Although one of the names that you did mention is a name that I think is really moved up in terms of the eyes of scouts, and that is Jet Luchenko, who is highly skilled, excellent two-way player.
Love that guy.
The comp that I had for him is Chandler Stevenson from the Vegas Golden Knights, where he's just an energetic scorer. And I think Luchenko ultimately has more top end skill and scoring ability, but he has this just tremendous willingness to defend. And so to me, teams should start considering him in that 13-14 range even, because I do think that there's a lot of value that he can provide, and potentially he's not a big guy, but he's a center. Like he plays the game like he is a legit two-way center with excellent energy and compete. And he's slowly become one of my favorites in the class. And therefore, another guy that after talking to him at the combine, spending more time seeing him, and hearing from scouts, that's a guy that is on the rise for sure.
Yeah, actually, I was going to ask you, in sort of your top 13, like who outside of it is that bomb, that guy that could be drafted in there that kind of blows up the order a little bit? Is it Luchenko? Is it somebody else?
Well, I think people are probably not, at least based on everything I'm hearing, like, Beckett Seneca is probably going to bust the top 10 wide open.
Sure.
Yep.
And if that happens, then that does create like this cascading effect of where the defenseman could potentially go. And that might leave a Yakimchuk or a Parekh or somebody a little bit south of, where we think they're going to go. But so I think that that's ultimately the one that could do it. Solberg is another guy too, where it's just been the talk is that he's on the rise, that they like him, that there's a lot of faith in what he can be. It's just, there's still that concern of, did we actually see what we saw, or is that what he's going to be, or is there a limited ceiling there because of the lack of offense? I mean, those are all the questions that are being asked. But basically, I think really after you get past, even after you get past the top tier of the draft, you're talking about guys with considerable flaws and things that could prevent them from ultimately reaching their top projection. But then you get into the 14 to 30 range and you're like, oh, then it's even more pronounced at that point. So interesting stuff there, but yeah.
Okay. This is a name that I'm actually not that familiar with. You, on your mock draft, you had Adam Kleber, defenseman from the Lincoln Stars, going to the Sharks at pick 33. Talk to me about Adam Kleber. Sell me on him, on the Kleber.
So he is, it's Kleber, but it's all right.
Kleber.
Kleber.
Yeah, already selling it. Yes.
He's I just wanted to do it because there have been a few podcasts where people said the wrong thing and I didn't correct them, and I was like, maybe I should have. And then,
you should.
Anyway, yeah. So I'm too Midwestern polite to be like that. But
no,
but
you
anyway,
should.
So here's the thing about Adam Kleber is a 6'5" defenseman, right shot, legitimate, just growth upside. He moves extremely well for a player of his size. I've had him right in that fringe first round range for most of the season. The reason that he might not be there at 33. There's the off chance that he's going to go in the first round. Wow. And the reason being his growth from year over year was really substantial. And his offensive game, while his numbers were not amazing, his offensive game has really come along in the last year. And it's, he went from being a guy that can only defend, isn't going to give you anything with the puck, to a guy that handles the puck decently well, makes a really good first pass, gets involved offensively, scored some goals this year. And on top of that, he has that big, long reach. He's got the ability to close. He's got the ability to be physical. I think if anything, there are teams that would like to see him get meaner at that size and be a little bit more sturdy. But he's going to the University of Minnesota Duluth, where they have done a really nice job with guys that play the way he does. It's been a real place where you see defensemen get polished up pretty well. Neil Pionk went there. Scott Perunovich, who's unfortunately dealt with a lot of injuries, won a Hobie Baker there. Wyatt Kaiser's been in and out of the lineup with Chicago. There's a number of other guys historically that have gone to Minnesota Duluth under Scott Sandelin as well, and have come out, pro ready. 6'5" right shot defensemen are very difficult to find. Obviously 14 is too rich, but 33 is like almost, I feel like you're almost getting another first round pick out of it. And the Sharks invest a lot of time in scouting the US as well. And so you've got a lot of guys that are seeing those players a lot, and not just one person on staff, but multiple people on staff. And, I just think that nobody's really sure where Kleber is going to go, to be honest with you. You talk, and there's a lot of varying opinions. There are some that don't think the offense is going to be there. There's some that don't, that aren't buying it all. But I do think, to me, he's a very early day 2 pick at worst. And so in the end, I just felt like, as you're still building that team out, you've got Mukko Madulin, you got Thrun. The question will be like, who's there? Like, one guy on the mock draft who I strongly considered putting there is Nikita Artemanov, who went in the next pick. And he's in the first round for me personally. It's just a matter of, one of the reasons I didn't put him on there is, as a Sharks pick, is because of Sheng's reporting that they don't have a Russian scout anymore. Not that matters, but it's like, they know the players.
Well, they don't have a scout in Russia. They
don't have a scout in Russia. Exactly. So
they've sent their, I believe, their Slovakian scout in there.
Yeah. By the way, that was still one of the most entertaining reads I've had, Sheng, this year, is learning about that whole process. But
it's a fantastic time.
Yeah.
That was a great 5 minutes with Mike Grier. Yeah.
It was good. I was like, you've been on fire this year, buddy. You've had a lot of good ones this year. So, yeah, so I mean, like, that's the thing. It's like Kleber playing for the Lincoln Stars this year, just tremendous growth. And I like the player an awful lot. I think he's a good kid too, and high character guy. And so there's a lot to like about him.
Yeah. 6'5" right shot defensemen that don't skate like they're in mud. Don't last very long. It doesn't matter against them.
Yeah, like I said, I will be, if he goes in the first, in somewhere in the 28 to 32 range, it won't shock me.
Another USHL pick at 42. I'm going to probably mispronounce it as well. Matvei Gridin.
You got it.
Yeah.
Nailed it. Way to go, Keegan.
All right. That one. Talk to me about him. So this would be the, I guess, the first forward after Celebrini for the Sharks.
Yeah, I think when you're picking in that early second round, you've got a couple of different ways that you can go. And obviously you get a Kleber, who's that guy that just profiles like an NHL defenseman, and a scarce product as a right shot with size. You get a guy in Gridin, who was the leading scorer in the USHL this year. So he's a Russian, but you didn't have to go to Russia to scout him.
Love it. He's already here.
He's already here. He's going to the University of Michigan. He is high skill. He's got good size. I think if there's one thing that people were unsure about with him, it's that, his sometimes the compete level can wane. Sometimes the decisions aren't great. But I also think, the only guy in recent draft years that outscored Gridin in his draft season that was like a legitimate prospect was Matt Coronado just a couple of years ago, and he went 15th overall. And that's the old, like, you think about all the other guys, and that's going way back, for a lot of these players. And I just think that the top of Gridin's game is really impressive. Like, he has skill, he scores, he's got some, when he wants to battle, he can do it. He has some strength to him. And I think going to college is actually going to be able to pull more of that out of him, because the game's going to increase in the pace and he's going to have to increase with it. And, he went from, I think he had 19 points. He barely played, in his first season in the USHL, just had a real hard time adjusting. And then he exploded this year. And I don't think it was a fluke. It was funny. We talked to him at the combine, and he was saying, what was the thing the scouts said that most wanted to see you improve on? He said, my body language. And I was like, yeah, I get that. Cause he kind of wears his emotions on him.
Interesting.
And when the game's not going well, and that can be a problem, like, and that might actually drop him down the draft boards considerably.
Sure.
But I think when you're picking in that range, the upside on a player with that offensive profile, is and size, frankly, is hard to get in that range. And so I just think, take advantage of some of those concerns and let him fall into your lap and get him in a more palatable range. And that's basically what I felt and why I put him with the Sharks.
And the Sharks have a history of drafting Russians from the Muskegon Lumberjacks, even.
The goose is loose, baby.
The goose is loose.
Yeah, we love it.
I mean, I think they're probably a little bit different sized, but,
Yeah, they are.
A little bit different.
Yeah, the upside factor on Gridden is higher.
Yeah,
I love
for
Gushin.
sure.
I love Gushin. But yeah.
I have to ask every single pundit that comes on about Gushin because I love him too.
Yeah, I mean, I loved him in a certain range. I didn't love him there. Yeah.
No, this is just for my own enjoyment. Anyways, go ahead, Sheng. You're next.
I was wondering who else you see of possible interest for the Sharks profile at 33 and 42. One thing that, speaking with Chris Morehouse at the Combine, that he alluded to were their picks last year at 26 and 36, Quentin Musty and Casper Houghton, where with both of those guys, talking with Chris, the sense I got was that that's a place that they still are they're kind of swinging big at still, not just size, but in terms of potential, right? And
Yes.
that sounds very much in that profile of Musty and Houghton. But anyway, anybody else that you see that kind of might land in that area for you?
Yeah, I think one of the guys that could potentially be available there in the early second round is Emil Hemming. Big guy, scorer, kind of
sounds like Houghton.
There you go.
Houghton-esque. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's a guy, if Dean Letourneau is able to slip into that 33, that's one where you say, but I mean, I just don't see I just don't see a 6'7" guy falling into the second round if there's any team that believes he has any chance to reach his ceiling. That's another guy. Liam Greentree as another guy where I don't think he's going to fall out of the first round, but he could potentially because he's not a great skater, but he's an elite hockey sense, high-end skill. So that's another guy that I have a lot of time for.
Yeah, I first with Hemi, I wanted to say, I think I may have told the story a couple of weeks ago, but I found it highly amusing. I talked to Emil a little bit at the Combine. I didn't really know him before, but I think someone had told me that that's a name maybe look for with the Sharks. And I asked him, or I heard he talked about how his shot, that's like his big thing, right? I was like, oh, he's finished. Shot is his big thing. Maybe he knows Casper Houghton. So I asked Emil, hey, do you know Casper Houghton? And he said, yeah, I know Casper. And I said, well, both of you guys are very proud of your shot. Who has a better shot? And Emil said that he does. And to let Casper know that. So I told that story a couple of weeks ago. So I want to put that out there that you're being challenged there, Casper. I wanted to ask you too, though, next. So Letourneau you mentioned, and so he is also another name that I've heard that the Sharks are asking around about. Another guy I wonder about is Gabriel Eliasson, defenseman for Sweden, actually in the profile of big, can skate, and maybe not do a lot more than that, big skate and mean. Very mean, actually, though, from what I understand. But anyway, what is your impression of Eliasson, who maybe not at 42, but maybe in a later round?
Yeah, so Eliasson is a really interesting guy. He's one of the biggest guys at the Combine. I like the player in terms of the skating profile, the physicality, the size, but I think the hockey sense is possibly prohibitive to him making it. Now, that's not to say that he's not going to be given every opportunity to make it, and should be, because I think that when you have the size that he does, when you skate as well as he does, there's got to be something there. But there isn't a penalty he doesn't love to take. Like it is. Yeah, he took one of the, so there were 2 penalties at the World Under 18 Championship that I will remember forever because of how much they destroyed their teams in the end. And he took a major, or not, he took cost his team a power play on a retaliatory penalty, did not play for the rest of the tournament after that. Dressed, sat on the bench. Then Trevor Connolly's major penalty that
Yeah,
Team
that
USA gave up 3 power play goals on. Those two I'll remember, and those stick out. But the thing was that I think Eliasson also had maybe 6 minors leading up to that, or 7 minors. Like, it was just, and they were unnecessary. And so it's, when I see that, I was like, okay, do you have the awareness? Do you have the self-control?
Sure.
But Eliasson's also interesting because he's coming to the USHL next year, which means he's probably going to have to drop the gloves more than a few times if he does that. The other thing that is happening is he's going to go to college. So if I'm an NHL team and I'm seeing that, I'm saying, well, he's buying us more years to make a decision on him. He's buying us time to, give him that contract. And I'm not entirely sure what the rules are going to be. Like, he's getting drafted out of Sweden. So but he's not going to be with a Swedish team. So I don't know how that impacts like his draft rights moving forward. But he's an intriguing player. It's just one of those things where I did list him, but I personally would not take him before the 3rd round.
Well, to quote Dean, or paraphrase Dean Lombardi, you can't paint tiger stripes on a house cat, and so I don't know if my career.
No, you can't
all
teach
those penalties.
I had one scout described him to me as evil. So
evil. Oh man, I love it.
There's that.
there is that. So after the second, and Eliasson sounds like he's one guy that fits this category for you, at least. Any other prospects that sound like potential Sharks to you? Sharks gap in their picks, of course, after their 42nd pick is quite a bit. It's 42 to 85. And then after that, it's fairly regular. But any other guys just kind of stand out to you? Any sleeper-ish guys?
Yeah. It's hard to say. I think there's a lot of guys that are intriguing throughout the draft in a lot of different ways. I mean, if you look at the various positions, where can you find value? I look at, if we're talking like in the 80s, a guy that has size and some upside and still a lot of game to get to is Hagen Burroughs from, he played at Minnetonka High School this year and played for the Sioux City Musketeers. So we're talking about, again, another American player, but with that size profile and then also some offensive ability. He's going to spend an extra year in the USHL and Sioux City before going to the University of Denver, I'm pretty sure. He may be going straight into Denver. I'll have to double check that. But either way, he's a very interesting player in that realm. I had Eliasson 82nd on my board, on my list. So, so he's in that range too. I think Timur Cole, a defenseman from Russia, good size. Matvei Sharavin, another defenseman, good size. Sharavin was on my mid-season list, but not on my last list. But he was right in the middle, right in the mix of that. If I was going like 105, he probably would have been in there, but I think he'll probably go. That's a player that I actually think could potentially go anywhere from the 2nd to the 4th round. I just have no idea what teams are really making of him, aside from, good size and mobility. But those are names to at least keep an eye out for. I think that there's a number of other guys like Heikki Ruonen, is one of the later guys on my board. Finnish player. He's coming over to the US as well. He's going to play for Dubuque next season. He was the number 1 pick in the USHL draft. And he's got a little bit of size. He had a really nice under 18 world championship, especially at the end where he was scoring goals, but good effort level, good energy, probably a middle 6 to bottom 6 forward. And so an interesting player there. So there's plenty of, there's always options, and the Sharks are going to, they do their work just like everybody else does. Sure. And, they'll have some really good opportunities to build onto their staff. But obviously those first 4 picks are critical, like absolutely critical. This is a draft you feel like you have to get as right as humanly possible. You feel that way about all drafts, but the urgency is a lot higher when you're in the position the Sharks are in, having won the lottery and, having an opportunity to make a big splash.
It's also, the Sharks currently have, I think, no goaltending prospects in their system, in their pipeline. They have a few guys that play for the Barracuda that we like very much, and I love Magnus Corona just for his story and his name. And Georgi Romanov had a good year, but they feel like they're missing any kind of goaltending prospect, and they missed on their last two with Mason Beaupitt and
Goodrow.
Goodrow. Thank you. I was like blanking on his name for a second.
Yeah, I know. You're blacking out. You don't want to remember.
Yeah, no, I know. Ben Goodrow. Is there any goaltending prospect that kind of excites you for that 85th pick?
I mean, I think that some of the guys are going to be. I just don't know what order the goalies are going to go in and when the run on goalies is going to start. It's a really weak year to be looking for goalies. It's not a great time. I mean, I think I look at some of the guys that, you know, at least are on my list, you know, Carter George, but he's kind of in that not the right NHL size.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like he's 6'1", really good hockey sense, you know, good technique, helped Canada win gold at that World under 18s. I mean, he did give up 4 goals in the final, but still it was, you know, like he could have given up 12 the way that the US was playing at various points of that game. You know, and so that's a guy that, you know, probably will be there at that point. Maybe Mikhail Yegorov, who was the number one goalie on my board, and then also NHL Central Scouting as the number 1 North American goalie.
A great interview too.
Yeah, great interview. Yeah, you were in that scrum. That he just really thoughtful kid, but he's got that size. He's got the NHL size. What he didn't have was a season where you're like, oh, those numbers are great. You know, he played on the worst team in the USHL, and he was hung out to dry so much. But you see the pro foundation of his game, so you know you're taking a bit of a risk on a goalie there. You know, so I think if the right goalie finds his way to that slot, then that's probably a good time to take him, because I assume once the run on goalie starts, it'll continue for a little bit. That seems to be just, they all kind of cluster together at some point. So, but yeah, that guys like that. Marcus Gidloff is another one, Swedish goalie, big frame, you know, he's kind of risen up the ranks a little bit himself. So it's just, it's not a great year to be looking for goaltending help. But again, how many goalies do we see go in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round that pan out to be starters? Plenty of them. So you never really know until you know.
It seemed like last year that was the what happened was like there was a run in the second and the Sharks kind of were left out without a goalie, right? I think Jacob Fowler went a couple picks ahead of where they took Svoboda for where they took Brent Svoboda.
Yeah.
So seemed like it, at least. That's my own personal theory. I've never confirmed that with them.
Yeah, no, I think Cora went like 10 picks earlier. So no, I don't know if you're right. I think that generally like both of you allude to that there is sort of that
run on goalies.
But well, Chris, I want to thank you so much for your time. I want to take you out with one more question. Keegan, are you done with?
I got nothing
for draft questions. Okay.
Yep.
I want to ask you about Will Smith, and you actually alluded to it earlier in the show. I actually have been dying to ask you this. Why was he not a finalist for the Hobie Baker? Like, how does that voting work? Do you vote for that, or just anyway? And what are the reasons that people have given for not putting them in there?
Well, I do not have a vote. I've never voted on the Hobie Baker Award. I've covered college hockey for almost 15 years, and I've never once voted for the award.
That's bullshit.
It is voted on by committee. The committee includes coaches. It includes former players. It includes media.
Okay.
And it includes broadcasters and other stakeholders and like commissioners and things like that. And they actually have calls and debates, and then it's silent balloted. And I remember I remember hearing a tale from one of the people that was on the committee when Johnny Goodrow won it, and it was so clearly Johnny Goodrow, and they like started having a little bit of a debate. And one of the college coaches said, "What are we doing? Stop it. We already know what this is. We don't have to overthink it." But I think the Hobie committee has often, it changes. It's not always the same group of people, but they have often leaned towards, it's got to be like a historic season for an underclassman to win, which Will Smith's season was pretty much, it was on pace with Jack Eichel and Kyle Connor. But also the voting happens before the Frozen Four. So, it does, the final vote is right after the regionals, which should have been more than enough to push them over. But, I think Cutter Gauthier was the leading goal scorer in the country. And then I don't even I'm trying to think. We had Celebrini, Gauthier, and I can't even remember who was third.
Jackson Blake.
Oh yeah, Jackson Blake.
Yeah, see,
yeah.
exactly.
So I can't tell you why. So yeah.
Okay. I just was curious. I've been dying to ask you that because I just couldn't. I understand.
I mean, there's
Macklin won, but
there's also a case that Zeev Buyum should have been.
Yeah.
In the
His season was insane.
It could have been all 3 freshmen, but they decided not to do that.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, we didn't even we got this whole podcast without mentioning Zeev Buyum. Like, is he just not even in the Sharks Ranger?
Yeah.
There's just no way. Yeah. No way he gets out of the top 10. I don't think. Unless
they trade up and somehow he's there at like 8, but it's going to be hard, I would imagine, if he's still there.
Crazy question, Chris. I asked Keegan this last week. Just a quick one here. Would you trade 14, 33, and 42 to get up to, say, 7 and draft Buyum or any of these prospects?
Yeah, I would. Yeah.
You would? Okay.
I would.
I think, 14, 30. If I Buyum or Buyum is one of the guys that I would do that for. Catton is another one I would do that for, although it doesn't, maybe not if you're the Sharks because of that, but I think either of those guys could, I mean Lev Shinov to me is going to be, he'll be long gone, so I don't think anybody's getting number 2. So
okay. And the last question about Will Smith, just your general thoughts of him coming out. Do you think that this is a mistake for him to come out? And also, too, how many points do you think he'll come up with next year?
We may have had this conversation off air.
Oh, we did, which is why I'm asking you.
So yeah,
we'll see if you say the same thing. So.
Yeah. So here's my thoughts. Like, generally, I want to preface all of this by saying that I think Will Smith is an absolutely elite prospect. He is incredible. He had an amazing season as a freshman. I never, ever once doubted that he was going to have a dominant point production season as a true freshman in college hockey. I expected it.
Sure.
That's not why I'm not a huge fan of him coming out. I still think there is a level that he can get to at the college game that is going to be harder for him to achieve in his first year in the NHL. And the reason being is that, unfortunately, and I mean, you guys are as painfully aware as anybody else, this is not going to be a very good hockey team next year, even if you have both Will Smith and Macklin Celebrini. Just 218.
You got Barclay Goodrow.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I do love the Ty Dellandrea trade. I think it's a good trade. But the issue with that, is just physical readiness, the grind that's coming. He went to the World Championship and really couldn't stay in the lineup. Didn't impact the games that he played in. And so the fact that he came out after that, as if it wasn't a example of why he shouldn't come out, is kind of interesting. The only thing is, like, you can never make a mistake staying an extra year. Almost never. Like, if it depends on the league. Like, if Ivan Demidov ends up in the MHL for a 3rd straight season, that's bad. Like, that's not good. But college hockey is such that it's kind of the hybrid of junior and the AHL because of the age of the players, the quality of the competition, the structure that teams play with. And the one thing that I think, if you're the Sharks, you're saying, well, now we did get him away from Ryan Leonard and Gabe Perreault, and now we can maybe really see like how much he's able to do without them. I've watched him enough to know that he'll be fine. Like, he's one of the more intelligent hockey players I've seen. But physically, the NHL is going to grind on him next year. I could see a scenario where I liken it a bit to like Shane Wright last year. 2 years ago, they tried to get him, and he was playing like every couple of games, and then they sent him to the World Juniors, and then they sent him to the AHL, and then they sent him back to junior. Like, that's the thing that you wouldn't want to see happen. Like, I think if Will Smith is comfortable with the possibility that he's going to have to play for the Barracuda at some point next season, then by all means, that's fine. But if that becomes an untenable situation he's just the reason that I gives me pause is he's just too important a player to not take every precaution that his NHL career is on the right track. I think next year is going to be a confidence shaking year for him. It's not going to destroy him or anything like that, but he's not going to do what he's been able to do. And when you talk about points, I don't think he'll touch 40 points next year. I think it'll be somewhere in the 30 to 35 range. And that's also given we don't know what the Sharks are going to look like around him at that point. If it's Barclay Goodrow and Ty Dellandrea, I'm not sure that's going to move the needle to enough to help him. And I think that's also the reason why when we've heard Macklin Celebrini talk about the potential of going back, which I don't think he will, but if he did, I get it, because it's not just about him. It's about the Sharks. It's about where they are and what next season's going to look like. And there are lessons you can learn at the NHL level, but the NHL has also broken plenty of prospects too before they ever had a chance to really reach their full potential. So the only thing is I'm coming at it from a point of overcautiousness because I want to make it very clear. I believe in Will Smith as a prospect. I believe that he could be a star player in the NHL. I believe he can be the Robin to Macklin Celebrini's Batman. And there are going to be times where we actually wonder who is Batman and who is Robin, just as we did with Taves and Kane. And so I do think that's possible. I just think you have to give him every opportunity to make sure you get this absolutely right. And that means being comfortable with sending him to the AHL, being comfortable with sending him to the World Juniors, being comfortable with maybe not having that immediate impact. And I think the other thing that I'm also curious about is, Will Smith saw after the fact, while he was at the World Championship with Team USA when the Sharks won the lottery. So then he now knows that Macklin Celebrini is on the clock. Would you want to fall behind a year of that player? That's what I wonder if that was part of the motivation. But now you also, if you're the Sharks from a business standpoint, you're talking about two players whose contracts are going to be on the same timeline, which is fine. I mean, I don't know if it matters. But that makes for some challenging things. I mean, we've seen it happen with, the Maple Leafs have to get this guy, and this guy done, and you have the Blackhawks ended up, signing Taves and Kane to $10.5 million contracts. And that was it wasn't the end of the dynasty at that point, but it got pretty close. It started the trajectory away. The good news is that the salary cap's going up, so it probably won't matter. But as long as it's a development first season for Will Smith, and it's about keeping him confident and building his confidence and making sure that he's understanding what it takes to be a pro, it could be a successful season, but I would not anticipate it being an impactful season for him, just because I think that there's enough that he still needs to get to in his physical development. And then also even to a certain extent, his hockey development, because there are certainly things he was doing in college last year that aren't going to work in the NHL. But there's a lot of things that he did that will. So I'm excited to watch it. I mean, I think if you ask any team in the league about having both a Will Smith and a Macklin Celebrini, they're going to feel real good about where they're at. So I'm excited to see where it all goes.
Yeah, fair enough that you may not have Will Smith as an early Calder candidate, but just want to make sure your thoughts on Celebrini, though, that you feel a little more sure of him stepping right into NHL and being a Calder Trophy candidate next year.
I don't know if I'd say a Calder Trophy candidate. I would say that, I think because he's a little bit more physically sturdy and I think he's a more complete player, he would be able to impact the game in more ways. Whereas I think Will Smith, we'd be talking about a guy that's going to be very sheltered, protected. Whereas I think Celebrini probably can handle a little bit more of that, get in there. So, yeah.
And then I actually question that kind of comes off of this, but is there any chance you think that Will Smith transitions to wing? I guess that's been brought up a few times.
Yeah, I mean that's gonna be very interesting to figure out. I think it's possible. I still think that he's a play driving, center. He's the fact that you have Macklin to be that real solid two-way guy allows Will Smith to be. I think having Celebrini on top of Smith it allows Will to play that more offensive, play driving forward game, because you know that Celebrini is going to get the tougher matchups and the different things like that. So, and then that makes you tougher to match up against, which I think is exciting.
Right.
That's like what Smith was doing at the World Juniors, where they had like the line play down, and
Yep.
they kind of dominated that way.
Yep.
So-
Yeah. I mean, yeah, and he's
And at BC
That's
as well.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, and yeah, eventually he became, you know, he won't be denied, you know, like that's the thing, is he finds a way to impact games. And I really, really enjoy watching Will Smith play. I really hope the Sharks, you know, get it right with both of these guys, because we'd be talking about, you know, one of the more entertaining duos that we'll see in the league if they both hit the top of their projection.
Love it. Chris, you've said plenty today, it seems like.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm just here to restore. Well, remember, I think was it the last time I was on, I was here to destroy hope.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
and then this time I've restored it. So I feel like I brought balance back to the Force.
Thank you.
I'm wearing all black too. I love this.
I
look.
know,
It's like,
I know.
yeah,
I felt
it's so
I was
fitting.
feeling like going negative, but no, today
we're all
I've talked
sunshine
so
and
much about
rainbows.
Yeah, exactly. I've talked to a lot of different places where it's like, you know, we're picking 22nd, and I was like, yeah, good luck, you know, whatever.
You're gonna get somebody.
You know,
They'll be
you're gonna
fine.
get a guy. Gonna be a guy. Yeah. So
we're like beaming over here the entire past couple weeks.
Yeah, I mean, and you should, like, just as a final message to Sharks fans and this PSA of joy. You know, I just think that this is a really exciting time for the franchise. It's going to take a lot of patience still, because there's a lot of building left to do. And as we've seen, you can't just do it with two guys. And there have been plenty of rebuilds that have taken a really long time. But if you have that centerpiece that you can build around, and, you know, obviously Edmonton was the example where they had a bunch of first overall picks and it didn't work out, but then they did get that foundational piece in Connor McDavid, and it did work out eventually. You know, I think the Sharks have had to not have to go through that pain. They won't have to go through that pain with Macklin Celebrini, and just take care of him, because he's a nice young man. And I hope that he does really well there. And I hope that, you know, that the Sharks and teal is back on top here. I mean, it's not the 90s anymore, but teal is very much still in fashion in my house. So let's go. Let's feel the teal again.
The future is teal, guys.
The future
is teal.
He's gonna have to Celebrity's gonna have to dodge all the Sheng hit pieces that are gonna come out. You know.
Yeah, I know.
They're real brutal.
Well, as long as he's not scouting Russian players, he'll be fine. So. Yeah.
All right, guys. Thank you so much, Chris.
All right, Chris. Thank
you
you so much. We'll see you in Vegas.
All right, see you, buddy.